Welcome to Ku-ring-gai Council's Public Forum. The Public Forum is an opportunity to share your views on any issues on the Council meeting agenda, on any other general matters that are important to you. Now, today we only have one item, which is GB1. It provides an opportunity for councillors to hear directly from the community, understand the needs and concerns of constituents, and make more informed decisions. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here this evening. Before we begin, I'd like to outline a few procedures in relation to this evening's public forum. I'd like to remind everyone that this is a public forum and we must all be respectful of each other. I remind councillors of their oath or affirmation of office made under section 233A of the Act and printed at the front of the business paper. All attendees must comply with the Code of Meeting Practice and other relevant council codes, policies and procedures. This meeting is being recorded and webcast will be published to Council's website. Councillors, council staff and speakers will be shown on camera. Attendees must refrain from engaging in disorderly conduct, publicly alleging breaches of the Council's Code of Conduct or making other potentially defamatory statements. Any statements made and actions taken by individuals are those of the individuals making them and are not endorsed or supported by Council. Councillors, council staff and members of the public must ensure that mobile phones are turned to silent during the forum. Councillors and council staff must declare and manage any conflicts of interest that they may have about any item of business that is on the agenda this evening. A few reminders for our speakers this evening. Speakers cannot use or present any props, audio or visual material. Any written material must be lodged when registering or handed to staff. Each speaker has 3 minutes to address council. A chime will sound when you have 30 seconds left to speak. If you have a lot to say, I encourage you to submit a written submission. Each councillor may ask a maximum of 2 questions. Speakers are under no obligation to answer, but if you do, please limit it to 1 minute. Speakers cannot ask questions of councillors or council staff. I will start with disclosures of interest by councillors. Are there any conflict of interest declarations for councillors? Councillor Sam Nye.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to declare that my parents-in-law have their home within one of the Todd precincts at the moment, and their home remains in the Todd precinct that Council has proposed with a reduction in floor space ratio.
Okay.
And I'll be remaining in the room.
Thank you, Councillor Nye. Councillor Alec Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too may have a significant and pecuniary conflict of interest as my personal home is affected by the proposed housing plan. However, the current proposal would likely have no impact on the value of my home as the zoning is very similar to the current zoning. And regardless and in line with the Model Code of Conduct, I will continue to participate in the debate and the decision on this vital matter for Ku-ring-gai.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Indu Balachandran.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will also declare an interest. My home and my parents' home is within 400 metres of the station of one of the Todd precincts. The value of our home may be impacted either positively or negatively by this change, and I will remain in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Balachandran. We have a number of speakers this evening on item GB1, which is the Todd alternative preferred scenario, proposed amendments post-exhibition. We also have a number of written submissions. I'm just advising you that we will have a break at approximately 9 p.m. and return at 9:15. Okay, so we'll all get started. The first speaker is Lee Coomber, and they will be speaking against. And if I do say against and you're speaking for, could you please just pull me up. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, councillors and community members. My name is Lee Coomber. I'm a resident of Blenheim Road in Linfield, and I'm here to speak on behalf of many concerned residents regarding Ku-ring-gai Council's preferred planning scenario. Specifically, the use of R4 zoning on fence line transitions directly adjacent to heritage listed properties and heritage conservation areas, or HCAs, in the Blenheim Road and Treats Road area of Linfield. Let me be clear, we're not opposed to growth, but growth must be balanced, responsible and sensitive to the unique heritage character of Ku-ring-gai, which is one of our community's greatest assets. Our concerns focus on several key points. Point 1, fence line transitions from high-density R4 zones directly into heritage or HCA properties must be removed. A direct boundary between a 12-metre apartment building and a single-storey heritage home or HCA property is not a transition, it's a rupture. It threatens the visual integrity, privacy and heritage value of the area. Point 2, if council is unwilling to remove these fence line transitions, then R4 zoning in these locations must be replaced with R3 zoning. Council has stated that the intended built form is townhouses, but R4 isn't townhouses, it's apartments. If townhouses are truly the goal, then R3 zoning is the appropriate and credible zoning choice, especially when adjacent to sensitive heritage zones. Point 3. Despite asking for multiple times, council has been unable to provide any examples, past or present, of R4 zoning directly adjoining heritage or HCA properties in Ku-ring-gai. In fact, there hasn't been a clear precedent provided for R3 or R2 townhouse developments next to heritage items or heritage conservation areas. That absence of precedent matters. To emphasise the depth of local concern, I present a petition here today signed by 149 residents opposing both R4 zoning and fence line transitions to the heritage and HCA properties. This is a strong unified message from the community. We respectfully ask council that 1. Remove all fence line transitions between R4 zones and heritage or HCA properties. Replace R4 zoning with R3 wherever townhouses are the intended outcome. Stop communicating that the FSR and height overrides the R3 versus R4 zoning. It doesn't. This is an attempt to make this argument irrelevant. The R4 gives you a build form that is an apartment. It's not a townhouse. And this can easily be changed to increase height and FSR, something that will be pushed by developers and something consistently referred to by the councillors in communication as flexibility. This is what more than just zoning. It's about preserving the legacy and character of Ku-ring-gai while accommodating thoughtful, appropriate growth. The two are not mutually exclusive, and it's council's job to strike that balance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lee.
Where do I submit the petition? I have 149 signatures on here. Where shall I submit them?
May I ask a question?
You may, Alec.
Yes, Alec.
Thank you
Councillor Taylor, sorry.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. And I have engaged with a number of residents in your position and similar position in the area. And I'm listening and hearing what you're saying tonight. And I just wanted to confirm that the petition that you're submitting is the same petition that you gave me on Tuesday morning, which I have here.
Okay, great.
And are you comfortable with me submitting this at the start of the meeting tomorrow night?
Yep, I'm absolutely fine with that. I wasn't sure if you had a copy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Our next speaker is Jem Pathanki, who is representing Ku-ring-gai Housing Group, who will be speaking against. Okay. Looks like Jem may not be here. We'll keep going down the list. The next speaker is Karen Bowers, who will be speaking against. Whenever you're ready, Karen.
Thank you, councillors. The state government TOD, whilst a blunt instrument, is transparent. You are either within the 400 metre zone or you're not. It does not allow for preferential treatment for east versus west of the railway line, or for the favoured child status that's been bestowed upon Roseville and Killara by this council. The disproportionate burden placed on Linfield and Gordon, with over 75% of dwellings under this current proposal, is short-sighted, and it leaves Roseville and Killara underdeveloped and sitting ducks for the next round of state government-imposed development, which we know will inevitably come. But tonight, I'm here to ask the question of council. If all HCAs are assumed to be of equal value and worthy of protection, as stated in council's own planning principles 2 and 3, then why are some HCAs more equal than others? In Linfield, council has extended the Todd zone to include the HCA of Treats and Blenheim Roads, with the stated aim of protecting the HCA. Yet the decision to allow R4 high density on the boundary fence of 16 homes in the HCA makes a mockery of this protection. One of those homes is mine. From the street frontage, you will see a heritage facade with a multi-storey development in the immediate sightline at the boundary fence. How can this be consistent with protection when protecting an HCA includes maintaining the character of the neighbourhood as a whole? There will be no coming back from this decision. Residents in the HCA will be trapped at 9.5 metres, with everyone around us creeping ever upwards. We will be unable to invest in the maintenance or improvement of our homes, knowing that any money we put into upkeep will never be recouped. We will be unable to maintain our property value, and developers will pick us off one by one at depressed prices once the HCA is destroyed and then the inevitable rezoning occurs. So if council does not intend to protect the Treats and Blenheim HCA, then why put it in the Todd zone in the first place? Given it's outside the 400 metres, it would be fairer to allow us to remain outside the Todd and be on an equal footing with neighbours under the low and mid-rise housing policy. My preference, of course, is to protect the Treats and Blenheim HCA by zoning Kenilworth and Highgate as R2 because they're directly adjacent to a boundary. But if this is not feasible, I ask council to be honest about the fact that the decision has been made to sacrifice the Treats and Blenheim HCA and move us outside the Todd boundary, or else rezone us to R4 so we can be consistent with our neighbours. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Karen. Our next speaker is David Lane, who will be speaking for GB1.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I am speaking for, but with severe reservations. Let me say that I'm very disappointed with the final plan. I did, like many of my community members, vote for the original 3B, which was 100% protection of the HCAs. However, what we find in the new 3B, which is really 2A by stealth, is that the HCA 39, which is Robert Street, is completely rezoned as R4. So my question to council is, if you're going to rezone it and you're going to develop it, then the few, and by your own admission, there are only a few, and by my count, there is either 2 or 3, heritage houses in that R4 zone. Why isolate them? Just delist them and move on. That's really what I am requesting. I understand that planning includes trade-offs. I also understand that you guys as public officials would understand this better than I do, that public good sometimes comes at personal cost. But if we're being asked to sacrifice our own home for the so-called greater good, then you need to remove the boundaries you've put in place to allow us to do that and comply. The reason I'm speaking for the motion is that I want to acknowledge that progress has been made, and I am in strong support of recommendation C in the motion, which is page 25 and 26 of the document, that calls for a complete heritage reassessment for all properties in Ku-ring-gai that planner controls differ from the KLP of 2015. I congratulate and applaud council for putting that into the motion. I'd also personally like to thank the Gordon Ward councillors. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Indu, for standing forth on that. And while that is a step in the right direction, I want to make sure that we understand what that is. It cannot be a desktop audit. It cannot be a paperwork-only audit. It needs to have clear, actionable outcomes like delisting, amending controls, or stronger protections for those heritage properties. Site inspections need to be done, not just paperwork. Report back to council needs to be timely. This is time critical, so therefore I suggest you do it in an incremental manner and not wait for the report to be done by all properties. And finally, above all, this is a genuine consultation with heritage property owners. It's shocking and remarkable that we've gotten this far down in the process and council has not engaged with any heritage owners. I remind council that we, the heritage owners, are the keepers of your properties. If as a result of this heritage reassessment, the problem is going to land back with us, the residents, then council must consider that they need to waive their application fees and simplify the process. Minister Scully said on the ABC recently that any reassessments should be done without any fees. Finally, in conclusion, let me say that I'm not trying to erase heritage. I live in a heritage home. What I'm trying to ask council to do is finish the job, as I have in my fourth speech here. So, you have to finish the job, because if you keep your heritage plan static when you're rezoning, that's not heritage protection, that's heritage paralysis. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Our next speaker is David Tyndale, who is representing About a Better Outcome under Todd, and I believe will be speaking against. Whenever you're ready.
Mayor, councillors, staff and community, I speak to you tonight on behalf of A Better Outcome under Todd. We're a group of local heritage owners in transport-oriented development, or TOD zones. We thank council for their work on the preferred scenario. There are many positives in the draft, and for around half our members, the preferred scenario provides better outcomes than for their projected future under TOD. We're pleased to see the recommendation for heritage reviews. We'd like much more detail regarding process and timelines as soon as possible, please. We would like confirmation of which 54 heritage items council regards as being within high-density areas, please, and note that there are many instances of heritage items adjacent to rezoned areas. We're delighted to see council recognise context as one of the criteria for heritage reviews. We believe context is one of the most important considerations when considering the validity or ongoing relevance of a heritage listing. In many cases, context will change completely. Unfortunately, many heritage owners throughout the 4 suburbs are still facing immediate threats to their properties. The rash of state significant developments has rapidly spread to all TOD suburbs leaves single and 2-storey heritage houses adjacent to or surrounded by proposed state significant development of up to 10 storeys. We note the recent change in savings provisions, which indicates that applications will only require Secretary's environmental assessment requirements to be considered saved, rather than being required to reach exhibition stage. Furthermore, with the extra 2 weeks grace for SSD applications, it's entirely possible that there will be yet further applications saved. This is a genuine emergency for the owners of these properties and should have been recognised as such by council from the outset, with appropriate action based on consultation with these owners. This consultation should now take place forthwith. For the heritage owners in the newly zoned areas, our situation remains similar to that at May last year. Our blocks are slated for development, with the heritage items required to be retained, but now with new accordance of development rights. We know that developers don't want to incorporate heritage items because it's difficult, expensive, and leaves them responsible for a heritage item. Developers will do what they can to avoid build around heritage. Unfortunately, this will render development rights ineffective in their current form. We feel that the only appropriate action is to delist the houses that will obviously be isolated. For those owners on the periphery of the rezoned areas, their context will also be permanently altered, and they'll soon endure similar trials through the low mid-rise zonings. These properties must be included in the heritage review process. These owners should also be afforded development rights as a matter of course, and these rights should not require incorporation of the heritage item. We'd like to see more concrete support for embattled heritage owners. 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's fine.
We'd like to see more concrete support for embattled heritage owners in Council's preferred scenario. We need Council to accept that for many heritage owners, our situation has been desperate for a year and continues to worsen. We need timelines, detail and consultation. We need Council to take appropriate and immediate action to give us a pathway out of here. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Our next speaker is Natasha Sherwood, who is representing East Side Roseville Action Group, who will be speaking for.
Good evening. My name is Natasha Sherwood and I'm the chairperson of a residents' action group which has connected with around 200 households to oppose the High Court development in the High Court SSD in Roseville. This SSD would be non-compliant under the preferred scenario, yet despite this it appears the developer has rushed their application so they could lodge before May. The deadline for submissions is next Wednesday, 28th of May. Firstly, I'd like to emphasise that our group broadly agrees that Ku-ring-gai needs to play its part in addressing issues of housing supply and affordability. While no scenario is going to achieve the perfect outcome, the preferred scenario offered by Council is, in our view, the best way to address these issues. There are regrettably individuals and streets that are impacted far more than others, and we will see that here tonight. And there is no doubt that this is extremely difficult for those affected. But this will be the case under any conceivable alternative scenario. It should not be a reason to delay. The sooner this scenario is submitted to and adopted by the New South Wales Government, the sooner the uncertainty will end. This uncertainty is only playing into the hands of developers. Delaying the adoption of the preferred scenario by even 2 weeks could potentially give developers more time to lodge even more non-compliant SSDs should the New South Wales Government keep moving the goalpost. It is time to draw a line in the sand and end the uncertainty. Once the preferred scenario is submitted and adopted, the countdown is on to it becoming the alternative planning control. Council needs to stay on course despite the curveball that was thrown at you over the weekend. In the end, your strategy should not change. It may be an unpopular thing to say here tonight, but SSDs and high density in Ku-ring-gai are unfortunately inevitable. We believe that what we need to do as a community is to hold Minister Scully to his word that applications under the existing TOD-SET planning controls will undergo a merit-based assessment. To achieve good planning outcomes, merit needs to prevail, not rhetoric around the housing crisis and affordable housing, nor pressure from the federal government to meet housing targets. If we take Minister Scully at his word, it is not good enough and will not be good enough for developers to lodge rushed applications that don't strenuously consider all aspects of the CEARS, including genuine community engagement. If they don't do this, their application should be rejected on merit. In our case, only 5 residents attended a community drop-in session out of an apparent 1355 flyers distributed. This is not surprising, given that 0% of the 100+ residents we've had time to survey reported receiving the flyer prior to the drop-in session. The preferred scenario is the keystone to all this. Our group urges Council to remain resolved in pursuit of achieving the outcomes you've identified and to submit the preferred scenario to the New South Wales Government without delay. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Our next speaker is Richard Arkell, who will be speaking against.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, councillors, council staff and fellow residents. I'm here tonight to represent the residents of Ontario Avenue, Thomas Avenue and Bromborough Road in Roseville, speaking on 2 points. One's around height and transition impacts, and the other is in relation to the related heritage conservation area. I have submitted a document, but it's somewhere in the melee of papers. You'll see it. Basically, what I'm sort of focusing on is the fact that Council has applied a height of 18.5 metres on the high side of Ontario Avenue, which in itself is contrary to the general precedent of 17.5 metres applied to these buildings, e.g. on Corona Avenue and also Boundary Road, which is a significant thoroughfare. But more to the point, Ontario is an incredibly steep slope, which I believe has been ignored by Council when developing the plans, unlike the original state TOD diagrams, which did not actually recommend any rezoning in Ontario. Council has a well-recognised height transition threshold of 1 to 2 where you've got neighbouring properties. Anything more than 1 to 2 is considered to be inappropriate. And my contention is, based on the topographic information that we've provided, that there is basically a 10-metre gap between the front of the building line of the proposed development and the road. So what that means is the new building will have a relative height of not 18.5 metres but over 27 metres in relation to the low side of Ontario, which is constrained to 9.5 metres. Hence that equates to a transition of nearly 1 to 3, which exceeds that unreasonable 1 to 2. And that clearly creates a problem in terms of shadowing and overlooking. And what we're seeking agreement from Council is to reduce the height on the high side of Ontario Avenue to 12.5 metres. We also referred to the wording of the Garden of Roseville Estate Conservation Area, which Ontario Avenue is part of. Talks about all sorts of things around the heritage and the buildings that are intra-war and so forth. But my question really is, what is the value of Ontario Avenue remaining within that HCA when it will now be surrounded by a series of high-rise buildings which are completely contradictory to the description of that HCA? I may not be the only person who's making that point tonight. But broadly, in summary, just to urge Council to revisit what I think is the iniquitous situation on Ontario Avenue and amend the heights to achieve a fair and equitable height transition inconsistent with that 1 to 2. And that's it.
Thank you, Richard. Our next speaker is Brian Harcourt, who will be speaking against.
Good evening and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Brian Harcourt from Kenilworth Road, Linfield. Of the thousands of homes impacted by the planned rezoning changes across Ku-ring-gai, there are only 95 houses in heritage conservation zones which are zoned R2 and have a planned transition across a fence line to R4. 14 of which are in the Blenheim Road Heritage Conservation Area where I live. I know Council is desperate to maintain the integrity of heritage conservation because you argued it comprehensively in your 57-page critique of the New South Wales Government TOD plan on the 20th of February 2024. You were critical of the New South Wales Government plan for not defining rezoning by roads. You also said, rather than the blanket increases proposed, the existing site-specific planning proposal exercise is the appropriate mechanism for sensitive increases in density in heritage conservation areas and heritage sites. So if you want to have a truly sensitive design, you should make every effort possible to protect the integrity of heritage conservation areas by minimising R2 to R4 fence line transitions. I know some in Council will argue that townhouses next to R2 zoning is an acceptable principle in Ku-ring-gai, and I'm sure it has been on an individual application basis. But according to my understanding, townhouses can be R3 or R4. Current plan zoning of R4 adjoining heritage conservation areas has a height limit of 12 metres and an FSR of 0.85. These, of course, can be changed over time and hence give us very little comfort this is a trustworthy solution. Perhaps R3 provides a more powerful planning tool to mitigate the risk if you can't find other solutions to this problem. You've done a commendable job making changes to the overall plan for the better, especially for the heritage areas in East Roseville and East Killara. It does come with a bit of a poison chalice, which makes those in Linfield feel exploited, neglected and ignored. I'm simply asking you to complete the planning task and review your approach to R4 to R2 fence line transitions in heritage conservation areas. I would also like to thank Councillor Alec, Councillor Indu and Councillor Barbara for doing a site visit in the Blenheim Heritage area on Monday. And I would ask all councillors the following. I know it might be hard to change the current position. I also know it's not impossible to try. You can do better to avoid the fence line transitions in the Blenheim Heritage Conservation Area. Thank you.
Hi, Brian.
Brian, if I
Brian,
could
I've
just
got a
get you come back up to the lectern. Councillor Sam Nye has a question
So
for
just
you.
to clarify, you're in a particular situation where you're in a heritage item adjoining what's proposed to be R4, 12 metres. Your proposed solution is for the development next door to be knocked down to R3 or R2, ideally? Or would you also be up for your own property having increased density? What is your...
Well, you've got three options, and it's not just about me, it's about a lot of other people. I would prefer 2 to 16 Kenilworth was R2. That would be my ideal solution.
What if your one was to become R3 itself somehow?
R3 or R4?
Yeah.
I would probably take R4,
Okay.
but then you're just rolling the problem up the hill.
Yep, sure. Right, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lara Bishkov, who will be speaking against and is representing residents of Stanhope Road, Killara. Whenever you're ready, Lara.
Thanks. Just to clarify, I'm
for? Okay.
for the preferred scenario, but against further delay.
Okay, no worries. Thank you.
Just to balance it out. Good evening, Madam Mayor, councillors, staff and public. Change, growth and development are part of life, but they can be fear and anxiety laden without strong leadership to guide a light to navigate through uncertainty. I speak on behalf of a number of concerned residents of Stanhope Road, Killara, when I ask for strong leadership from Council. Council has demonstrated innovative leadership in seeking wide community engagement and working out ways to provide effective solutions for the housing crisis. Council has been exploring ways to accommodate new housing whilst preserving the area's valued heritage and environmental assets. And I applaud and appreciate the extensive efforts of Council and staff to prepare the Todd alternative scenarios. Good housing planning requires a future-focused approach in consultation with the community, with developments being assessed on their merits. 19 state significant development applications have been submitted before Council's preferred housing scenario has had the opportunity to be refined and submitted to the state government. Some of these SSDs, including Stanhope Road, are inconsistent with Council's preferred housing scenario. Stanhope Road is in a heritage conservation area with 9 heritage homes, one of which is mine, between the Pacific Highway and Culworth Avenue, representing nearly half of the street. A non-complying high-rise development in Stanhope Road of this magnitude would diminish the overall value of heritage conservation area in the street. I quote 2 parts from Council's website. Ku-ring-gai Council is committed to delivering the highest quality service, valued and trusted by our community. And secondly, under the Council history, today Ku-ring-gai is a culturally diverse society that still retains much of its unique natural and built heritage. Please Do your best to ensure the natural and built heritage remains for the future. Council members, you have been popularly elected by the community. You hold responsibility for making significant decisions that have a far-reaching impact on our community. You have been elected because we, the people of Ku-ring-gai, trust you to manage the local issues, plan for and respond to community needs. You are the voice of our community, advocating for our interests to the other levels of government. I implore Council to lodge a submission with the SSD on Stanhope Road, objecting to the proposed development, and suggest an alternative that is consistent with Council's own preferred housing scenario. Please do not let all the work that Council has done to prepare the preferred housing scenario be in vain.
Thank you, Lara. Our next speaker is Matt Sherwood, and they are speaking for. Oh, there you go.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Matt Sherwood, and I'm speaking in favour of the preferred scenario and Ku-ring-gai Council's strategy of providing more affordable housing in our communities. I firstly would like to commend Ku-ring-gai Council for the work done in the past month to get us to the point where we can provide the required density and protect the vast bulk of heritage. Some people, given what the state government has done, some people here tonight are bearing a huge price for this, and we should never forget that. But sadly, because of the state government, the vote here tomorrow night is not about everything being saved. It is a simple case about risk management and having the highest possible heritage being saved while giving the state government what they insist on. Tonight we are simply shaping the debate about two very important choices in our community: who can oversee heritage and when that begins. Council's approach for the last 20 years, whilst not perfect, has been about openness, transparency and merit. In contrast, the current TOD has the odds firmly stacked in the favour of developers, which creates a very rich temptation where perceived urgency could trump merit-based arguments. There appears to have been another curveball thrown at Council over the weekend, but that is not controlled by you guys. The only thing you control is the votes tomorrow night. Voting down or even delaying the preferred scenario only serves to leave the current TOD in place. It would quite possibly mean further state government delays after the 13th of June. And that opens the door for an exponential rise in new SEERs and infill SSDs for the Minister solely to determine. I have seen firsthand what happens when developers use the infill mechanism. In my suburb, there is a proposed development over 30 metres tall, smack bang in the middle of a heritage conservation area, which has been described as being good for local workers, blending in with heritage, and wait for this one, being well supported by the local community. Now, this sort of silliness has got to stop, and I believe the preferred scenario will give us that, end result. Given the continued uncertainty, though, the proposition that an exhibited preferred scenario where full and proper consultation has occurred should be deferred yet again is both frustrating and concerning to our community. Delaying it to some unknown date in the future risks a flood of rust applications and would change Council's governing dynamic around the existing TOD from save what we can to brace for impact. The uncertainty for the community needs to end, and that can be achieved by Council voting for the preferred scenario tomorrow night and submitting that to the Planning Department as soon as possible. Sadly, time is the developers' friends, It's not ours. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Matt.
I got a question, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor
Thank you, Madam
Devlin.
Mayor. Thank you, Matt. You've spoken about risk in terms of timing and governance. Could you elaborate on what you see as the greatest immediate risk with relation to heritage or the environment and planning control if the preferred scenario was to be delayed or voted down? I think you've pretty well summarised it in the final punch there, but what do you see as the immediate risk?
Well, I'm a hedge fund manager, so risk management is pretty much my life and my career. The way I'd weigh this up as a fund manager would be that we are saving 80% of heritage, so therefore, if we delay the preferred scenario, we are risking that 80%. The alternative is not saving 20%, it is actually losing potentially quite a bit more, because all the delays serve to do is leave more time for more developers to come in and submit infill affordable housing plans. And the state government plans over the weekend means they now don't need environmental impact statements. They actually just need SEARs. And quite honestly, all you really need for that is to get options on property. So to me, the biggest risk is actually the fact that we might lose a lot more than what we have rather than gain more. I think it's a false economy to think the state government will do deals about more protection. I would argue, given their behaviour in the last week, they're more likely to do less.
Thank you, Matt.
Right.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Peter Tulip, who is representing the Centre of Independent Studies and will be speaking against.
So, my name is Peter Tulip. I've lived in Ku-ring-gai for 14 years. I'm Chief Economist at the Centre for Independent Studies, where I do research on housing policy, and I'm a member of Sydney YIMBY. I'm going to disagree with almost all the other speakers here tonight. I want to oppose the many objections that are being made to extra housing. Experts agree that Sydney has a housing affordability crisis, for which the solution is increased supply, specifically more density at train stations. Every council needs to contribute to this, especially those like Ku-ring-gai with good public transport and overpriced housing. Those key points are endorsed by every significant political party. However, many people in this room and in this community don't appreciate this message and are resisting. I genuinely think that the opponents of extra housing don't understand the reasons for the state government policy. When I come to forums in this room, I hear complaints about parking, about shadows, about normal-looking apartment buildings, complaints that are trivial when families are sleeping in cars and tents. I don't think the opponents of extra housing understand how angry young people and renters are. They're angry about not being able to live near their work. They're angry about being denied the opportunities for home ownership that their parents had. Understandably so. To talk about two specific examples, Park Avenue Gordon and Lord Street Roseville. These are in line with the TOD, but not in line with the council's preferred option. I think it's both bad policy and poor tactics to object to proposals like these being saved. We need to get the building going. Moreover, substantial development at these sites was actually supported by a majority of respondents to the council's recent survey. Specifically, if you add up options 1, 2A and 2B, you have a majority in support of developments like these. I worry that the rest of New South Wales is losing patience with Ku-ring-gai's bad faith and obstructionism. If Ku-ring-gai loses its social licence, then control over planning will be taken even further away from council and consultation will be even more limited we should stop trying to slow and obstruct further construction. Thank you.
Okay, if you could just wait there one moment, Peter. I have a question from
Thanks for
Councillor
coming
Ali
along, Peter.
Taylor.
And I respect your views, although you and I have had some very robust debates over the last 18 months.
Yes, thank you for those.
My question is that given the preferred scenario initially proposed, for example, at Park Street, a similar height of building, but 50% of the footprint of the building, of the lot, would be allocated for deep soil for trees. My question for you is, how does that factor into your proposal to go ahead with those two particular state significant developments, the value of trees and tree canopy in our residential buildings?
I think trees are much more important for the aesthetics of a streetscape and hence for neighbourhood amenity than is the age of buildings. Where there's all of this talk about preserving old or unusual buildings, what really matters for the amenity of the neighbourhood is preserving trees. And I'm very strongly supportive that we should have more trees, especially street trees, which is the ones everyone passes and is what affects the value of the community. I would really like council to use some of its Section 711 contributions, if I'm naming that correctly, towards having more street trees. And often that will involve burying the overhead wires, which are the big enemy of street trees, putting them under the roads or elsewhere. I recognise you can't put it directly under the tree and it's expensive, but that's part of what Section 711 contributions should be for. Maybe they're not actually for that, but they should be, and that would do much more for the community, using this huge value created by this uplift to make it something of some benefit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Our next speaker is Malcolm McDougall Fisher, who will be speaking against. Okay. Maybe Malcolm's not here. I'll just say Malcolm McDougall Fisher. No? Okay. We'll move on to our next speaker, which is online via Zoom, and that is Toby Freeman, who will be speaking against. Go ahead, Toby.
You can hear me?
Oh, yes, I can hear you, but I can't see you. Oh, now I can see you, whenever you're ready.
So I honestly wasn't too sure if this would worth my time, because I think based on what we saw at the last consultation, where basically everyone got up and opposed it, it didn't seem like the actual concerns of the community were addressed in the decision or in the minutes that I've discussed it. But I thought maybe I'd give council another chance to listen, given that it's such a significant amount of backlash to this. But I'm not going to just explain why it's bad, because they might tell you that, because we understand that every proposal, every outcome, no matter whether it's the government, any of the alternative scenarios, are not ideal and not something that council want to adopt. They've had their hands forced. But I don't think that the option that they are choosing, the preferred scenario, is the best outcome. They might try to tell you that, people are going to support this, but I just don't think that's true, because only 33% of people voted for it. And I'd suggest that most of those are just people who live in Clara and Roseville, not reflective of the whole community. So yeah, sure, they might capture a certain small amount of the community who are strongly supported, but not everyone. And I would suggest that probably, I'd note that it was like one of the most leaked preferred scenarios as well. So it's quite a divisive scenario. Why do I think this scenario is unfair and should not be endorsed? I think three for this. One, it's killing Linfield and Gordon, which is widely acknowledged. I don't think the council are necessarily trying to hide it. But I don't think the council should get to pick and choose what they save. It is a bad situation, and I think it's unfair to, principally unfair to the residents of Gordon, to the residents of Linfield, that they get forced this hand Because instead of having townhouses, which, as we kind of heard before, aren't really that bad, they're not great, but they aren't really that bad, it's going to turn into big, tall apartments, which are going to overshadow these areas. It's going to turn the suburbs of Linfield and Gordon into a place like Chatwood, a place that doesn't really have that community feel, which is why people moved into it. But the most concerning thing, and this was re-emphasised today, is I don't think they've really targeted how this extra load, the massive amount of people, which is disproportionate to the other immigration into the suburbs, is actually going to be integrated. There's no explanation how schools are going to accommodate this, how traffic is going to accommodate it, how the trains, as we saw, which was so disastrous today, are going to accommodate. Yes, most of this is state government planning, and I think we've seen that the state government don't really care too much about Ku-ring-gai. It's a Labor government. We aren't their voter base. So I think by this nuanced approach, which might be good in the short term, it's going to create massive long-term ramifications for the suburb. It's going to be impossible to park. It's going to be impossible to get into school. It's going to be impossible to get a train. It's going to be impossible to live in these suburbs. And I think they all for more equitable distribution, a more equitable approach, which shares the burden that we have to bear across all 4 suburbs of Ku-ring-gai.
Okay, thank you, Toby. Our next speaker is Sandra van der Water, who is representing Pearson Avenue Preserve and Protect Community Group. And Sandra will be speaking for.
Thank you. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak for the Pearson Avenue Protect and Preserve Group in favour of reduced yield in G1, G2 and 3 north of Park Avenue. We thank you all for all the detailed work that you have done, and in particular our Gordon councillors who have highlighted our concerns to the planners. We fully endorse the proposal from the planners to reduce yield in our precinct to offset the SSDs and reduce heights down Pearson Avenue. It is gratifying to see that the issues peculiar to our pocket of Gordon have been recognising as deserving of reduced yield. The blocks in question are outside the 400 metres on sloping land and not directly opposite Gordon Station. Our precinct is characterised by a wide corridor of tall canopy trees, dense foliage and abundant noisy wildlife. Down Pearson, the built environment is low-rise and dwarfed by the many trees extending up to the railway. Please come and drive your car to Carlotta Avenue, park it and look across to the railway and try and count the trees. We provide the green lungs, mopping up the fumes of the highway and cooling our suburb. It's a truly beautiful and unique pocket adjoining Richmond Forest and deserves preservation and protection for different reasons to heritage streetscapes. Secondly, traffic. We are set to receive multiple R4 buildings, but now also to receive over 200 apartments Burgoyne and Park Avenue, right near the already bottlenecked intersection. And this will only get worse as people try to drive to schools, daycare, and of course there are people who will be driving to work. Putting hundreds more people in the blocks down Pearson is not viable from traffic perspective and livability. Thirdly, infrastructure in our part of East Gordon is in dire need. Despite Gordon taking the burden of a massive increase in population, we do not have a large school, we do not have sporting fixtures, a district park or imaginative play spaces to support the population. Thank goodness, the wonderful Gordon Preschool will remain, as is with its heritage building, homely environment and outdoor garden. The children of the future living up in apartments will need to feel grass under their feet. This garden is one of the few green spaces in central Gordon, and we hope that by reducing density down Pearson, there will also be communal open spaces created in G2 and G3. Lastly, in the amended document that we're discussing, Council is striving to deliver setbacks of unit blocks from the street, ensure proper height grading in most areas to the low-rise housing and design excellence. This is to be commended. The proposed SSD, however, in Burgoyne Street fills the block to the street with multiple units, stark white balconies, more akin to Main Beach in Queensland. No attempt has been made by the developer to blend the architectural style with the low-rise. So we're looking for more sympathetic developments and no more SSDs until the infrastructure's in. In summary, We stated in our original submission that we do support increased density, but with more mid to low rise in our area as a more considered and welcome planning outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Our next speaker is Julia Lipsky, who will be speaking for.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, councillors, members of the community, staff of the council. I guess a lot's been said this evening and a lot more to come. I speak in for the proposed update to the Todd application. I live in Gordon, in the same area as Sandra, and the effort that's gone into getting to this point by council, the initial proposals, the updates, the revisions, the trying to balance everything must be a nightmare, and thank you for your efforts. We've had a win on this, and I guess we're perhaps some of the few speaking tonight. Along with what Sandra said, the reduction in the height of the developments along Pearson are just significant. It's a steep road, it's a relatively narrow road. There's not a lot of parking around there. What's interesting where we are in Highlands Avenue and Carlotta, it's a little pocket that once these developments start will actually get cut off. We have access 2 ways out to Mona Vale Road, but there'll be so much traffic along our street, which currently isn't. It will be interesting to see what happens. In the mornings along Pearson, you just have to walk up to the train station and you can see how far back the traffic goes. This is before there are any developments. By reducing the heights of the developments along Pearson will have a massive impact. We know that this has been going to be going on for many years. It'll impact all of us. It'll impact our sanity. It'll impact our kids. It'll impact everything in the community, and there just needs to be a way to keep all of that sanely managed, and that's where I guess we're relying on council to have thought through some of those people issues as distinct from the environment, the property, the heritage. As Sandra said, you know, come and park at the bottom of Carlotta Avenue. So the eastern side has an amazing canopy of trees, even after those storms in 2019 when many were knocked out. We just had to cut them out. Hundreds of years old trees. This is so important for our community. Probably the only thing missing is a couple of parks, but we've heard that one before. And, you know, having those for kids in high-rise buildings, not 5 blocks away, but somewhere in our local environment is imperative. Probably that, I don't want to repeat what others have said, but I just want to say that, you know, it's incredibly difficult to make everybody happy. This is outside of the control of council. This is the state government. Maybe we need to vote now. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Our next speaker is John Hannelly, speaking for. Take your time, John, no rush. That's all right. That's okay.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors and fellow residents. So my name's John Hannelly and I'm speaking as a member of the Pearson Avenue Protection Group. This is very, very short, very brief. Look, I strongly support the proposed change as outlined in Attachment 8 in the new amendment preferred scenario, as this, from our point of view, would result in vital improvements, 3 major improvements. Firstly, as been mentioned, it'll greatly reduce the traffic problems that presently exist and improve the access to the Pacific Highway from North East Gordon. And I think that the number of school children, the preschool, it'll greatly alleviate safety concerns, so it's a step in the right direction. Secondly, in terms of transition of the heights, this proposal reduced the heights of previously proposed 29 metres and 18.5. In stark contrast to the other side of the road, this greatly improves the transition, and so is aesthetically pleasing as far as that's concerned. And thirdly and lastly, This actually reduces the density of dwelling numbers on the east side, Gordon, by a substantial number, and then evens up a little bit the disproportionate burden that Gordon was facing. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Our next speaker is Amanda Hassett, who is representing Heart of Linfield Dwellings and speaking against.
I'm here today representing myself and the Heart of Linfield Dwellings Hold Group, which is essentially the Blenheim Road Linfield HCA. It includes Blenheim, Kenilworth, Treats and Nelson Roads with 11 heritage homes. I'm a heritage listed owner within this HCA. In 2016, I commenced the renovation process for my growing family. I loved my home and Linfield. It took me 6 years. 5 years of getting approval from council, I ended up with a court-settled DA. The process wore me down and took a huge emotional toll on my family. I also couldn't work during this time, as it was so time-consuming. Council wouldn't discuss the issues, but everything needed to be approved, from the exact paint colours, internal stair location, or changing an internal sliding door to a swinging door. I renovated meticulously, even reverting the terracotta roof to the original slate roof. During this process, I was informed I wasn't an owner, but a mere custodian of my property. What does that make council? As an originator and assessor of heritage, council is the ultimate custodian of all heritage listed homes and HCAs within Ku-ring-gai. Council has a duty of care to protect. Our job is to maintain. I've done my part, but for the Blenheim Road HCA, why aren't council doing your part? From the outset, council stated all HCAs are created equal, so why is Linfield getting 3 times more residents in Roseville and Linfield? It's causing Linfield development to get higher and closer to our HCAs. The original state TOD didn't impact our HCA. Today, under council's recommendations, it's on our front doorstep and back fence lines. 1 to 19 Highgate Road has been zoned R4, and in the recent version, 2 to 16 Kenilworth has also been zoned R4. Council isn't adhering to their TOD planning principles, minimising impact to heritage, preserving HCAs, managing transition impacts, and ensuring appropriate heights. These houses directly border heritage listed and HCA homes. They should be buffer zones to minimise impact on heritage from the scale, height and bulk of developments, ensure privacy and prevent overshadowing of buildings and gardens. An argument you supported in your own submission to state government. Council isn't listening to its residents' submissions. We now have 149 impacted residents petitioning for council to review their decision. R4 zoning is flat residential buildings, not townhouses. It isn't precedent yet, but if you approve it, it will be in these zonings. Hold is requesting council to adhere to the road-based transition principle versus fence line to protect heritage properties. Remove the R4 zonings for properties 2 to 16 Kenilworth and 1 to 19 Highgate Road, Linfield. Council has an obligation to protect all HCAs as the ultimate custodian of heritage and HCAs for the residents it represents and the preservation of the Australian architecture. I'd like to be clear, as a heritage listed owner, my only option is R2 zoning and to protect the HCA, which is the context for heritage listed homes.
You could just...
I've got a question.
Amanda, are you able to take a question from Councillor Sam Knight, if that's okay?
So just testing part of the concern. Are you concerned that under this council proposal, the TOD boundary shifts out and therefore you are included within the boundary? And as a result, as part of this 2 to 16 have R4, whereas the rest of the HCA do not?
Sorry, just to clarify,
Are you concerned about the shifting out of the TOD boundary? Because you weren't originally part of the TOD, right? So is that part of your grievance or concern?
As I understand it, I wasn't originally part of the TOD because it was only 400 metres. Then you made it beyond, like up to 800 metres to include the whole of the HCA. So as I understand it, whilst it is in the HCA is in the TOD, then the LMR policy doesn't apply.
Yep.
Correct? So my goal as a heritage homeowner, and at the T intersection of Blenheim and Kenilworth, there are 5 heritage listed houses right there. My goal would be to preserve the HCA as much as possible, and so that for all those homes along Treats Road that back onto Kenilworth, where you have rezoned it R4, and for the homes along Blenheim Road that back onto the rezone on Highgate, I would be for protecting the HCA, just like you have for Roseville and Kalara.
Yeah, sure. And then the second question, if council were to pull back the boundary of the TOD back to where it was before, would you be satisfied with the low and mid-rise, which would result in your neighbours to your left, to your right, to your back, to have height 12.35 metres, floor space ratio 1.04 to 1, while you are stuck at floor space ratio 0.3 to 1, and overshadowed by apartment buildings left, right and behind?
So I like the proposal that the TOD extended to where it is now, because it does protect the HCA, but it doesn't. But your proposals to change Highgate, Highgate and Kenilworth Road are unfair to the existing owners within the HCA, because the development is right on their fence line. So they're getting a single story dwellings. Every house, that is what our HCA is known for, is single story dwellings. And when you put an R4 zoning on the back of that, that is a 3-story flat residential building. It's quite contrasting and overshadowing to these smaller buildings, and it's not in ratio to what you give the example in your papers.
Which is that height 12.35 would be allowed under the low and mid-rise with apartments surrounding you. Am I allowed to ask one final question?
Yes, that's fine, Councillor No.
What are your thoughts on the possibility of council allowing for, within the HCA, a higher FSR? So not something obscene, not something extensive, but something like FSR 0.5 to 1 with a bit more height, so that the transition isn't as great, but so that you still have the opportunity to respect the character of the HCA by having the street front but building up the back. What are your thoughts? Well, it's too much of a loaded question.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would present itself in FSR. Yeah, I would need to have a look, and I would like to have more of an open dialogue to you to speak about that and what that proposal means.
Right,
yeah, instead of answering directly.
Thanks, Amanda. Our next speaker is Donna Palmer, who will be speaking against.
Mayor, councillors, attendees. My name's Donna Palmer and I'm speaking on behalf of the HCA residents in Highfield Road, Linfield, who are against this alternate proposal. In the Linfield alternative, the current one, the amended one, there has been a number of TOD boundary changes accepted and has resulted in a bite out of the Linfield alternative at the northwestern boundary. This area has one heritage item, but otherwise the houses were not considered significant as no HCA was created. There is uplift available here as this bite is within the 400 and 800 metre distance from the station. Why has it been omitted? Affordable housing is not included in the Linfield Village Hub according to these plans. It is a logical place to include affordable housing as there will be economies of scale when building to the heights planned. Why? Both of these should have been included in the alternative, providing offset units needed that could save the Balfour Street Highfield Road HCA. As I pointed out in my submission and not considered, private schools need to be maintained and recognised in any planning, as more schools will be needed, not less, with an expanding population. Not excluding these items from high-rise development produces a false expectation of housing development unit numbers. I am referring to Holy Family Catholic School, Highfields Kindergarten and Preparatory School, and Holy Family Catholic Church, all in Highfield Road, and none are intending to sell to developers. Highfield Road number 6 is a heritage item. The owners of numbers 8, 10 to 12 and 14 Highfield Road, my house, and number 17 Balfour Street have no intentions of selling. 7 Wallace Parade, which is on the corner of Highfield Road and Wallace Parade, is a complying development where a large 2-storey house is currently under construction. It is highly unlikely that any of this aforementioned land will become available for high-rise. Thus, Council will not achieve the set housing target numbers in the Linfield alone. This is only one small part of the bigger picture. When combined with other pockets of resistance throughout the current 4 affected suburbs, it is clear that the preferred alternative scenario housing targets will not be met. Council has one opportunity to fix this so that targets are achievable. Make a motion to alter the alternative to change TOD boundaries and rezone this site in Linfield. Adopt more of the original 3B alternative that was voted for originally, and Council can save the Balfour Street Highfield Road HCA whilst achieving housing targets in Linfield. When the TOD was first proposed back in December 2023, I had contact with the councillor as a result of my volunteering and expressed my concern regarding my beautiful heritage home. I was told, and I quote, "Don't worry, Council has a plan and we will save your house. Don't make promises you are not going to fight for and ultimately don't keep." None of my comments were included in the report summarising feedback pertaining to heritage conservation areas. Both the original TOD and the first council alternative threw the owners of heritage homes in Highfield Road under a bus. This revised alternative has now taken us out from under the bus and instead thrown us under a huge mining truck by having the height reduced for high rise on these properties, thus reducing the value of our land if ever we chose to sell. At the recent drop-in planning meeting, the following was stated in answer to a question I posed about development. Not concerned whether it happens or not, so long as the numbers meet the prescription. Failure by Ku-ring-gai Council's plans to reach housing targets required is not what the state government wants to hear. I urge Council to make a motion to amend the plans as I have outlined as part of the Council meeting tomorrow night. Be brave, do something daring and actually do the right thing. You have one chance to get this right. Save Highfield Road, Balfour Street, HCA.
Thank you, Donna. Our next speaker is Peter Downey, who will be speaking for.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors and the community. I'm a bit like David Lane. I saw this council's preferred scenario as the better of two evils, and I'm a conditional for council's preferred scenario, noting that I was disappointed that council has failed to put forward the preferred scenario, which was the popular one with people, and that was the original scenario 3B, and that protected all heritage conservation areas with no upzoning of those areas. As it stands, the Trafalgar Avenue Heritage Conservation Area is not protected as a heritage conservation area and will be upzoned to R4. As a consequence, our home, the only heritage item in the Trafalgar Avenue Heritage Conservation Area at Middle Harbour Road, will be zoned R4, allowing 5-level apartment buildings before any uplift for affordable housing and 18.5 metres in height. Already under the housing SEP, following the TOD amendments, there are 4 applications for state significant developments within 100 metres of the boundary of our house. Indeed, one is diagonally opposite, with each such development proposed to be at least 9 stories. And according to the late agenda for tomorrow's council meeting that was issued today, an environmental impact statement will now not be required for any of those developments, so they are likely to proceed. That outcome is a disaster for our local area. Council says our home will be protected in any development as it will receive transferable floor space, which may be transferred to another part of the same development site in which it is included. But that is only should our home be included in a development site. And as a solicitor who has acted for developers and financiers to developers over 40 years, I can tell you developers do not act in that way. Heritage items create uncertainty, they create complications, and given the opportunity, a developer will shy away from it. And what does that mean? That means our home will be just left as an isolated, stranded site, incapable of development, the only one in the Trafalgar Avenue Conservation Area. We will end up being surrounded by 5-storey developments all around us in the fullness of time. The listing of a heritage item is not a static exercise, and changing times and contexts must inform the appropriateness of a continuing heritage listing. I commend Council on proposing the commissioning of an independent review of heritage items that are to be upzoned in the Todd area. My view is that if a heritage item is at risk of losing its historical neighbourhood context, including by a change in zoning that will allow low to medium rise development, then the heritage item should be delisted. This is even more the case when it is Council itself that has caused the rezoning and thereby the inappropriateness of the heritage listing on the home. I speak to you tonight due to the uncertainty this has created for the owners of heritage items affected by the upzoning of their homes. That uncertainty affecting the value and saleability of homes. As I am powerless to prevent the proposed upzoning, I ask Council to have regard to the interests of the owners of heritage items in those heritage conservation areas proposed to be upzoned and support our request that those heritage items be delisted. I am not seeking a windfall gain from this, only the power to sell my home at the time I choose to downsize and achieve a fair value for it. If Council refuses to delist heritage items that are capable of being surrounded by 5-storey apartment buildings, all the Council will achieve is an anachronistic planning outcome, which no one will regard well in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Councillor Taylor, can you wait till I
beg your
say
pardon.
your name?
Thank
Proceed.
you. Sorry, too keen.
I know you're excited.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter, for coming along. And I think that individually listed heritage items is arguably the very worst outcome for residents of Ku-ring-gai out of this whole process. And I very, very greatly feel some responsibility to try and help you and this situation. My question for you is, would you think it was right to remove the listing, the heritage listing of your house, individual house, if it wasn't on the basis of merits, to simply just remove that listing?
I believe it is, and I'll tell you why it is. We bought the house in 2012. I still have the 149 certificate from the contract for sale, and I'm willing to share it with councillors. That certificate says two things. There were two draft items on it. There was a draft heritage preservation for the house, and there was a draft of the Trafalgar Avenue Conservation Area. The house was being considered for heritage protection at the same time as the Trafalgar Avenue Conservation Area was being considered for protection. You have taken away the protection for Trafalgar Avenue Conservation Area, yet you have retained heritage listing for my house. It is absolutely inconsistent. You cannot list a heritage item as part of a heritage conservation area which is being considered and then remove the protections for the heritage conservation area and leave the heritage item in place.
Yep, thank you. And Sorry, just one follow-up, if I may.
Sure.
And I guess this question is possibly not that helpful, but are you aware that we have actually left those protections in place for the heritage conservation areas, that we're not changing them?
The council papers talk about the Ku-ring-gai Development Control Plan being amended. There is no information that is available to the public on that. I know the Ku-ring-gai Development Control Plan currently provides for 12-metre setbacks from heritage items, but even that, surrounded by 5-storey apartment buildings, you lose privacy, you lose sunlight, and you're surrounded by these tall buildings, and people will look at it and they'll say, I can tell you, what would you say? You look at it and you'll say, amongst all these 5-storey buildings, there's a single site there. There's a fellow at 9 Middle Harbour Road. Different case, not in a heritage conservation area. He's got a state significant development on one side, 9 stories, and a development application on the other side of him, which is going to be 7 stories, I believe. I mean, that is just crazy and ridiculous. He will never be able to develop his land. I at least want the opportunity to, and I don't propose to develop, and I said I didn't want a windfall gain, but I'm 64 years old and my kids are leaving home this year, probably, or early next year, and it's a 5-bedroom house. It's time to move on, and I don't want to be stuck in the same position as Mr. Ian at 9 Middle Harbour Road.
Thank you for coming and sharing.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Rob Farrington, who will be speaking against.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, councillors and fellow community members. Just to put in perspective, I have spent most of my 58 years growing up in Killara. I've lived where my father still resides on the east side in Killara, and I purchased my current house in Marion Street in 2004. Back then when I was moving in, I discovered that the first new building was to go up in Marion Street, which was a Mirvac building. I wasn't too perturbed at the time, knowing that Mirvac is a quality build, and I just came from living in Balmain, of which there's a hopscotch of different buildings, terraces, etc. So I thought actually existing houses there, it's added a lot more appeal, and it was a very big discussion point at the time for my parents and their friends, talking about the transition to maybe move into sympathetic, well-built, buildings at the time and remain within Killara rather than selling out and moving on to other suburbs. The next point being, in 2008, I submitted a DA for my house to do some renovations, part of which was to put a sympathetic carport out the front of our house on our circular driveway. Council rejected that at the time, saying that will change the streetscape, etc, etc. In the meantime, there was new DA applications being approved down the street for lower quality buildings, which regularly now have upkeep and issues that weren't sympathetic to people like my parents that want to move into it. So part of that natural, I would have thought, transition from people back then to organically, for the community to grow and change, the opportunity for council back then was to allow quality build to go on, and that would happen. But that, I think, the extent of that and most of that has now been lost. Moving forward, to today, during that DA, I spoke to a council member and said, what do you think the future of Marion Street will look like going forward? And he said, well, I can say with these developments going on, at some point it will change, and I'd suggest to you that your house at some point will be rezoned, as other houses at that time that were going on in these streets, down here in Gordon. So at the time I decided I wouldn't go ahead with my renovations, which I'm glad I didn't. Anyway, that day of reckoning came when I read in the newspaper about the new Todd proposals, of which many people said, to us and my neighbours, which are non-heritage listed houses, that we are the perfect block. It sits on the high side of the street, north-facing backyard. It's a 150-metre level walk to the station. None of those apartments, by the way, in our street have added to any congestion because they all use the station. The next point being that, I thought, okay, well, this will go ahead and at some point I'm going to be able to sell my house. But the new scenario that's been proposed from the council has removed us from that proposal, In the meantime, you've rezoned the car park and the Marion Street Theatre. So again, I feel after doing my bit, I've been sweeping my street. I live out the front where those trees cross over. But you can see from the Mirvac building, there's great canopy out the front, and as I think it was Peter Tulip said, one of the key components to all this is this great tree cover, of which my house and my surrounding neighbours' houses have great tree canopy along the boundaries. And that's why I've had proposals from different developers, and they've said we want to build, if we're allowed, an absolute quality building that would attract people within the community. It would be hidden from the street. It won't cast a shadow across the road, and I think it makes perfect sense. What I don't understand is how places over 800 metres as the crows flies has been approved for extra rezoning. Where I'd be disadvantaged again is I'd have further foot traffic coming down my street. There'd be more people commuting and trying to park in the car park, and financially I'm now in a more stricken place. As I said, I haven't redeveloped my house. I thought this change would come, and I'm at this point in time, given, and I'll just a couple of points on our place that
You've run out of time, so
okay,
if
I could just ask you if you could reconsider the current proposal that we have not been rezoned, given the absolute flat access and where we sit, in Marion Street.
We've got a couple of there was a question from a councillor, but they've changed their mind. So thank you, Rob.
I'm happy with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Emmanuel Dammit. Who will be speaking for?
Thanks, Madam Mayor and councillors. Look, it's always really difficult to speak to a complete document. So I'm certainly for, but I'm speaking specifically in relation to the Pearson Avenue, Carlotta Avenue area, as described within Attachment 8, I think is the right attachment reference. And I appreciate the considerations that council's given to our earlier input, because it has made a big difference. So I'm going to confirm that I'm in support of the latest proposal, specifically the reduced height limits in that area and the commitment around the reductions associated with any SSD approvals. So all of that makes sense. I note in the report that traffic studies are underway, and I guess from my point of view, I want to reiterate the need for improved traffic management outcomes at the intersection of Park Avenue and Carlotta, and at the exit of Carlotta onto Mona Vale Road. The traffic environment is poor today. We've said that before, and it's very clear if you just go and stand there during peak hour. And it will be unmanageable with increased density. That is not to say don't build, but that is to say there are consequences, and it is dangerous at the moment. It's dangerous for children, it's dangerous for pedestrians, it's dangerous for drivers who basically are ducking on the wrong side of the road trying to get access. My encouragement to council is you're in a position that the state government is forcing you into. We recognise that, and that's very important. But we'll also need to push the state government for improved Mona Vale Road off-ramp access onto the Pacific Highway. Make it their responsibility that in response to actually providing that density, that you can actually get your off-ramp occurring reasonably on Mona Vale Road, because the congestion at the bottom of that road is what limits that area. That's where the restrictions come in, and that's where a lot of our concerns sit. We've got to hold them to account. This is to offset the traffic consequences of their requirements. And so from my point of view, that's my encouragement. I guess finally, and a lot can be said about the environment, we get criticised as the council that cares more about trees than people. That's a load of rubbish. We're supportive of the development. But we need to maintain the environment outside of the reserves. So I encourage, and I'm encouraged about the comments around the tree canopy. And I'm going to close with what the birds that we've observed just in my small area. Powerful owls, southern boorbooks, tawny frogmouths, Barza falcons. That's irreplaceable. Please maintain the cover as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. We're now at 8:59, so we're close enough to 9 o'clock, so we will call a short break and return at 9. Okay. Thank you all for your patience. We will now resume the public forum. I have our next speaker as Mark Franklin, who will be speaking against. Mark Franklin, is that you? No. Okay. Is there a Mark Franklin in the room? No. Okay, we'll move on to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Tom and Melanie Laylaw. I'm assuming only one of them is speaking? Tom, okay. And Tom will be speaking against.
I'm a long-term resident of 12 Treats Road, Linfield, which is located between the highway and the railway line. Our street marks the northern boundary of Linfield, with Kalara beginning behind our back fence. Since registering to speak yesterday, 3 of my neighbours at 12A, 10 and 8 Treats Road support this submission. I believe with time more would support it. This submission concerns the houses between 4 and 26 Treats Road, comprising, I think, 17 properties. Council's current proposal upzones most Linfield properties north of the station between the highway and the railway, except these 17 properties. These properties will face upzoned 5-storey developments across the street, and approximately half the properties will back onto upzoned R4 properties at 3 to 19 Kalara Avenue. Oddly, these properties have been included in the Kalara TOD and excluded from the LMR provisions, even though most of these houses are at least a 1 kilometre walk from Kalara Station. I'm not aware of any other properties in the Greater Sydney area that are included in a TOD that is different to the closest train station to these properties. This TOD inclusion is unprecedented. It is manifestly unfair that 6 homes on Treats Road are proposed to be removed from the Stanhope Road HCA, with most of these upzoned to 5-storey, while the remaining Linfield properties in the HCA from 4 to 26 Treats Road are excluded from the rezoning and left facing the increased density, substantially degraded HCA. The proposed loss of the adjoining Wolseley Road HCA has made this even worse. This results in a discriminatory, inconsistent and inequitable approach where some Linfield homes in the HCA benefit from rezoning while others face only adverse impacts. We believe the fairest outcome is for the 6 homes proposed for removal from the Stanhope Road HCA to be reinstated and for 3 to 19 Kalara Avenue to remain zoned R2. If this cannot be achieved, we ask that properties at 4 to 26 Treats Road and specifically 8, 10, 12 and 12A, which I represent tonight, either be excluded from the Kalara TOD or given the opportunity to be rezoned R4 with a height limit of 12 metres and an FSR of 0.85 to 1, which would be consistent with the properties behind us. This would firstly provide more consistent and fairer treatment for Linfield residents within the Stanhope Road HCA. Secondly, align with the goals of upzoning Linfield while protecting Kalara. And finally, create a more appropriate transition toward the core heritage area of the Stanhope Road HCA. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Sam Nye has a question for you, Tom.
Hi, Tom. How would you feel if, and I've said this question before, if you are kept as an HCA within the TOD, but you're given an increase in FSR, maybe 0.5 to 1, maybe 0.6 to 1 with R3 zoning? Is that better than what you've got now, or would you rather be taken out of the TOD altogether?
In order of preference, it would be taken out of the TOD first. Secondly, on your specific question, in order of preference, taken out of the TOD first. Secondly, be rezoned to be consistent with the houses behind us and Kalara Avenue, which is R4 12 metres, 0.85.
Okay, thanks. And then my second question, how do you feel about people who say, oh, well, it's an HCA, so we must insist on it remaining as 0.3 to 1, even though they're surrounded by 5 stories, which end up being 7 stories with infill?
Well, I believe that whether this is universal view or not, the Linfield and Gordon HCAs have been compromised, and if they need to, some of them need to be jettisoned, so be it, in the interest of saving Killara and Gordon. Sorry, Killara and Roseville. And ours is already compromised because you've annexed 6 properties. So by further compromising, certainly the Treats Road residents have to face that. The other side on Killara and Stanhope don't really see it so much. If our HCA is edited to be consistent with the rest of that northern Linfield area, I think that's acceptable.
Okay, and just finally, thank you for coming. I know there are other Treats Roads residents who think similarly to you, but it's important that they are heard in front of the councillors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Our next speaker is Lisa Tarleton, who will be speaking against.
Thank you, councillors. I live in Roseville in a small group of streets at the southern end of Ku-ring-gai Council on the west side of the Pacific Highway. We have limited access routes to the Pacific Highway. Our safest access is via the traffic light at McLaurin Parade, which is already a congested intersection at peak hour. We've written repeatedly about traffic concerns and the impact of a significant level of development in our small precinct. Several points I want to make. We're not confident that our concerns have been listened to and taken seriously despite many resident letters and submission to council. And by the way, we've never seen the traffic report, although we were told repeatedly that it was coming. On page 31 of recent documentation, council cites considerations of the traffic changes around McLaurin. And in quotes, transport consultants have assessed the existing transport situation and transport impacts of the New South Wales government's TOD-SEP key transport-related works already identified in the Development Contributions Plan 2010 that have been reassessed include the road widening on Pacific Highway to accommodate 3 northbound lanes and fully controlled right turn lanes into McLaurin Parade. Those changes from your documentations do absolutely nothing to solve the traffic problems that we've been writing submissions about. Nothing. So we have great trouble getting out of our group of streets at the light, which is the safest way to get out at peak hour. Shirley Road has the same problem coming up on the Pacific Highway. It gets blocked, we have no way to get out. So in our small group of streets, the area adjacent to Shirley Road has already been sold to a developer and I believe is subject to an SSD. And we understand the part of the proposal is to put a new road between the end of Pockley Avenue and Shirley Road, coming into a dangerous corner. It won't solve either problem for Shirley Road or McLaurin Parade, and will only create a rat run. So the new road will be down a big dip. They'll have to acquire houses. It will be very expensive projects with very little benefit. We understand also that there's a park proposed down in that dip. Well, I don't know if you want your kids play in a moist park with lots of mosquitoes, but that's what it looks like. So if there's going to be a park, it should be at the top end of the street, not the bottom end of the street. So my questions, I guess, for the council are, well, I think you need to have more user views. Usually when you introduce a new product, you get the user views, and I know you've welcomed submissions and so forth, but I think you actually need to door knock if you're going to put that new road in and get the lived experience of whether that's actually going to make any difference that will be useful. I do have a question also that I would like somebody to address, that with SSDs, will residents have an opportunity to object as they do with the council development or not?
I'll refer that to a staff member, actually. It's more appropriate. Michael?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, that is correct. The submission period is currently 28 days. Anyone who makes submission, their submission will be considered by the Department of Planning in assessing those applications.
Okay.
Thank you. I have a question from Councillor Alec Taylor.
Thank you for coming along. I'm very familiar with the challenges around Maclaurin and have been talking to many residents in that area. Just further to Director Mysick's point, your feedback needs to go to the planning department on the SSDs. But I do have a question for you. How do you feel about the Boundary Road Corona intersection and the highway? Do you see that as part of the solution to the traffic problems, which, by the way, exist prior to Todd? You know, this is pre-Todd.
That's right, and we already, pre-Todd, have 90 additional residents in our small group of streets, which will only congest the situation more. I know a lot of my neighbours would favour that access from Corona across to Boundary, or at least being able to turn right out of Corona at the light to head south on the highway. I don't know if that's realistic, but I know a number of the neighbours would like to have that put into consideration.
All right, thank you.
The point is, you can't do it without infrastructure, traffic, schools. You know, how can you develop thousands of extra apartments without considering those things?
All right, just one more question, Lisa, from Councillor Sam Nye.
Thank you for coming and presenting, and I'm sorry to hear that you've written in the past and haven't really heard a response. I share your frustrations with going out on the Pacific Highway, which is a state road, and constant tensions with the state on the performance of that highway and the rights of residents to drive onto Pacific. My question is more with regard to, like, we're in a position now where we either do nothing at all and we get the default Todd, which is already in place, or we make changes and have a Todd alternative. And as far as I can tell, when I compare the two, I feel as though the western side of Roseville, near Maclaurin, where you live, is actually getting less density than on the state default. So what realistically would you, or ideally, have council do to further improve your situation?
Look, I've learned a lot tonight, and about, you know, it seems imperative that you do go ahead and pass your preferred thing, but you need to continue to address those problems and push the state and say, you know, how are you coordinating with transport and with, you know, roads and with schools and so forth?
Okay, cool. So when you say you're against, are you actually against the council's proposal to slightly reduce density in the area, or you're just really against because of traffic issues?
That was your word, not mine. I wanted to voice my concerns.
Okay, yeah, sure.
But I'm not necessarily against you passing the current proposal.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Our next speaker is Paul Hitchcock, who will be speaking for.
Good evening, councillors and councillor staff. My name's Paul Hitchcock. I've lived in Roseville with my wife and children for over 20 years, so I know the area well. Look, we understand and accept the need for additional housing in the Ku-ring-gai area as part of the accommodating Sydney's growing population. We get that. We also recognise that developing a strategy to meet the state government housing targets is a complex and demanding task for council. And while there are understandably different views within the community, and we've heard them tonight with all the options presented, trying to please everybody will result in pleasing nobody. I commend the council for its rigorous and thoughtful approach, taking the time to develop multiple scenarios, particularly the staff who do all the heavy lifting, actively seeking community feedback, and even holding this meeting and allowing everybody to have their say, which I think is very good. And this kind of community engagement is, for major planning matters, is vital and very much appreciated by the residents. As we set up there, I would like to express our support for the council's preferred scenario, and I'd encourage council to advocate strongly to the state government for a merit-based assessment process, one that honours the commitment to consider the future character of our area. However, time is of the essence, and the sooner council submits the preferred scenario, the greater the opportunity to retain local oversight and ensure robust checks and balances are in place. If action continues to be postponed and the council delays making a decision and embracing this, my fear is there's a real risk that significant planning decisions get taken out of council's hands and instead will be made by the state government with input from other entities with their own vested interests, namely profit. And we all know who those are. And that's potentially and it will be to the detriment of our community's interests. Developments as a result of poor or rushed planning will remain for generations to come. And their impact and the character of our heritage in our area will be irreversible. I respectfully ask the council to act without delay, to move forward and submit the preferred scenario to state government for their adoption. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Our next speaker is online, so speaking via Zoom is Alistair Webster, who will be speaking for.
Yes, thank you. And thank you all at the other end of the screen. Firstly, I would like to absolutely confirm that I strongly encourage council to adopt this preferred scenario. It's horrible to think that so many people are affected, and we've heard about that all tonight. And it's awful that a state government could take away individuals' livelihood of where they live and have material impact. However, to pause and to not be affirmative in a decision forward tomorrow, I think would be to the detriment of many more people. And I think Paul Hitchcock, who just talked before me, I would absolutely echo his words. Time is critical. I think leadership really is about making active decisions, and I thank the councillors for their time, and I thank the council itself for its time, but I would strongly encourage that you make decisions tomorrow so that you can act and be on the front foot when it comes to the Department of Planning. I've had dealing experience with New South Wales departments over the last 10 years, and I think the first thing they'd love to do is to continue delay, and delaying will only have a negative impact on more residents in Ku-ring-gai. So if I could please ask that you do make active decisions and show the leadership that you've been entrusted with by our local community, I'd really appreciate that. And thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. Our next speaker is also online, which is Anthony Lee, speaking against.
Hey everyone. Good evening, everyone. My name's Anthony Lee, and I own the house at 21 Francis Street, located on the west side of the highway in Linfield. Our house is a heritage listed item that, based on your proposal, will be directly next door to an R4 zone development. I would like to add my weight to the argument that a fence line is not an appropriate boundary for transition. My property will potentially have a 12-metre development next door, or possibly over 15 metres high if we factor in the state's height bonus of 30%. This will be mere centimetres away, completely overshadowing my house with a pool and 2 young girls. A road would be a much more logical and common sense boundary when considering transitions between zones. I suspect the proposal was created with my heritage listed item in mind, basically zoning R4 all the way down Bed Street until it hit my house, and then stopped. It didn't stop 2 houses prior on Lyndall Place, where there was a road, nor did it extend to incorporate my property and stop at a logical point on Francis Street. In fact, if you look at the boundary on the west side of the Linfield, you see this weird step shape at the boundary before the road. That's my house. This weird step-shaped boundary just to bypass my house seems nonsensical, and in no way preserves heritage, given the scale of development mere centimetres away. Every other part of West Linfield has a boundary defined by a road. This weird step shape, which excludes my house, seems inconsistent and just doesn't make sense. You've already created precedent by incorporating heritage items and areas from Beaconsfield Parade into the adjoining properties which have upzoned development. Why? Because presumably it will look weird and out of place to stop a zone in the middle of the street. That's exactly what you've done in my situation. Just because my neighbour's house has an address that's called Bent Street instead of Francis Street doesn't change the fact that they are just a fence away. Please be consistent and not make poor planning decisions just because of isolated heritage item properties such as mine in 21 Francis Street. I urge our councillors to put themselves in the shoes of homeowners who are directly adjoining higher zoned properties. Does this make sense? I don't want your alternative TOD to be known as towers over doorsteps, because that's what your new TOD means to me. Towers over my doorstep. That's what happens when you change zones in the middle of the street, because this is your opportunity to do better than the original TOD, which was arbitrarily based off a distance. You've got an opportunity to apply a much more logical design that makes sense of the community. And also, this decision can be made without waiting for an independent review on heritage items to be performed. So I urge you to please reconsider your transition boundaries so you don't create these towers over my doorstep, and factor in, the community as a whole in terms of your consideration for your decision making. Thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you, Anthony. I've just got one question from Councillor Sam Nye, if that's okay. Councillor Sam Nye.
Thank you, Anthony, for coming to present. So to me, there's two solutions. Either fix the R4 that's on your boundary fence, or perhaps give you a bit of additional uplift as well, even though you're a heritage item. Would you be open to either, or
yeah, so we'd definitely be open to either in terms of stopping it prior to hitting our property. And then I kind of want to echo what one of the previous people said, though. If you extend the R4 to include my property, I don't want it to be an isolated heritage listed item which developers want to avoid. I think the better scenario for us would be if you were to rezone us to R4, you also would look to delist our property as well, such that it doesn't create this weird scenario where developers are kind of trying to go out of the way to avoid incorporating that aspect of design into their builds.
And then my second question is, what if it's in between? So instead of floor space ratio 0.85 to 1 or floor space ratio 0.3 to 1, it's something in between so that the heritage facade can be retained while you can still build up the back. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that would probably be lower on the list based off, your earlier proposal. So, in order of preference, what you described earlier, either stopping it earlier and keeping, our neighbours R2, then moving on to, if we were zoned R4 to apply that to our property but delist. And then kind of lastly, if we were to give them an option of in between, then I guess that still is better than the current proposal from our perspective.
All right, thank you for presenting.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Anthony. Our next speaker is Edward Burrell, representing owners of 2 to 16 Kenilworth Road, Linfield, and speaking for.
I live in Kenilworth Road, Linfield, and this evening I represent the owners of number 2 to 16 Kenilworth. Like most of my neighbours, and indeed most of the people here this evening, I'm upset by the extent of proposed development in Ku-ring-gai and beyond disappointed that Linfield is being forced to bear the brunt of this development. And I will continue to oppose the worst excesses of this, including certain SSDs currently being reviewed by state planning. That said, under Council's original preferred plan, my property was to face a 5+ storey apartment block, and my non-HCA house was to be preserved, leaving no transition from 5 to 2 storeys, counter to the principles under which this plan was developed. I believe that 2 to 16 Kenilworth would have been the only, certainly one of the very few, R2 zoned properties in a non-HCA within the TOD. As stated, I remain opposed to the overdevelopment of Linfield. However, as this tidal wave is to hit us, whether we like it or not, it would have been inappropriate and demonstrably unfair for non-HCA housing within the new TOD to not only be treated as de facto HCA, but also with an extreme height transition of greater than 2.5 to 1. In the case of Kenilworth Road, the amended preferred plan addresses this anomaly, and I would like to thank Council for addressing this issue. I can understand why some of my neighbours do not share similar appreciation, and I share with them great upset at the changes brought on our neighbourhood that the state government's plan are bringing to Ku-ring-gai as a whole and Linfield specifically. I'd like to clarify a few points that have been raised or inferred this evening regarding the Kenilworth Road amendments. 2 to 16 Kenilworth Road are not in a heritage conservation area. It was previously determined that these properties were not of heritage value. Transition between R4 and R2 across a fence line is not unique to the proposed amendments in Kenilworth Road. Throughout the preferred plan, R4 to R2 transition exists across fence lines, not just streets. In the case of Kenilworth Road and Highgate, this transition is significantly mitigated by the topography, with the remaining R2 properties on Treats and Blenheim respectively situated at a significant elevation from the proposed R4 properties on Kenilworth and Highgate. Kenilworth Road is south of Treats Road. There is no risk of overshadowing. For context, it should be noted that 2 to 16 Kenilworth Road were originally to be zoned as R4 under the previous 3B option. Thank you to Council for proposing the Kenilworth anomaly correction, and I look forward to working with you to mitigate the worst excesses of the proposed SSDs. Thank you.
Thank you, Edgar. Our next speaker is Arnold King, who will be speaking via Zoom, so he'll be online. Arnold, whenever you're ready.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. My name is Arnold Kang and I live in East Side, Roseville. I am in strong support of the preferred alternative TOD scenario and strongly encourage the councillors to vote in the affirmative for tomorrow's motion. Although not a perfect scenario, and I do empathise with the predicament of the owners affected, it is overall a much fairer solution than the existing TOD. It is a comprehensive, well-considered, overarching plan in stark contrast to the crude existing TOD and SSDs. It is certainly supported by many of the larger community organisations. There are around 150 heritage items in the TOD zones, and the alternative scenario manages to save 2/3 of these. Thanks to the preferred scenario, the vast majority are not going to be surrounded or isolated by 6 to 9 story apartments. Having said this, I do strongly support a reassessment of heritage items in the upzoned areas and those adjacent to or opposite SSDs. Heritage owners should not have to suffer isolation on behalf of the community when their property has lost all context and therefore meaning in the developed areas. Council has always been against isolation and therefore should strongly consider select delisting during this reassessment. This upholds the principle of fairness and equity. Time is of the essence as SSDs are increasing seemingly on a weekly basis. Our TOD areas deserve more certainty. The constant uncertainty is only benefiting the developers. Ku-ring-gai Council needs to present the alternative scenario to state now, not in 3 weeks' time, to prevent further irreversible destruction of the TOD suburbs HCAs. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Arnold. Our next speaker is Susan Turner, who will be speaking for.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors and everyone else. I'm a bit of an anachronism tonight in that I have lived in East Roseville since 1987, but my property is not affected by the New South Wales TOD or by the council preferred scenario for development. So in that sense, I'm giving a more, I suppose, independent overview of the effects on Roseville that I'd like the council to consider in its preferred scenario, which I support. I acknowledge the need to increase housing density close to the public transport corridors. And I also acknowledge that the council preferred scenario will disadvantage a different set of homeowners in our council area, which makes it difficult to negotiate residential conflicting interests across suburbs to achieve the increased housing demands required. And I support Paul Hitchcock's begging the council to please make a decision on this as soon as possible, because I think that's to every resident's advantage, but also acknowledging that it does disadvantage some. However, I also want to look at the effects on infrastructure, because I strongly believe that any development that happens in our council area needs to be considered in the light of infrastructure. If the increased residential density is achieved in Roseville, we need to improve the traffic flow to our major road arteries, and there is a desperate need, in my view, for a commuter car park, at least in Roseville, if not as well as up to some of the other stations further north, like the one in Gordon. I'm sure the council's aware that since the start of the metro and the lack of commuter parking in Chatswood, cars are arriving from out of area and parking up to 600 metres and often more from Roseville Station on the east in our residential streets. The station car park is now totally inadequate, and residents are finding it increasingly difficult to park close to the station for trips into town, or even to shop for more than 15 minutes in the shops. The metro is fantastic, but what is the point in building great public transport infrastructure like the metro and trying to convince locals not to use their cars if we cannot reach this infrastructure easily? The need for urgent consideration of this, with the successful integration of 9-storey units blocks close to the railway, will only make this situation worse. The traffic issues are very relevant to the increased development proposals. We're now currently landlocked in Roseville, in that it's almost impossible to turn towards the city from Archibald. It's very difficult to get out from Clanville onto the Pacific Highway. And also, this morning at 8:30, there are around 30 cars back from Hill Street trying to turn into Boundary Road. I would beg the council to please consider the infrastructure issues with traffic flow as much as possible. Thank you.
Susan, we've just got one question from Councillor Alec Taylor.
Thanks for coming along, and I greatly appreciate you coming from out of area. We had a lot of response out of area through both of the consultations. My question for you is, are you familiar with our long-term plans to build what is effectively a Roseville Village Green under the Lord Street car park, acquiring properties adjacent to it?
I'm not, but all I would beg is that the current situation is untenable. Since the metro started, the traffic parking density for commuters is beyond imagination, and it needs urgent attention. Unfortunately, that does not mean limiting the parking areas in our residential streets to residents, because the whole idea of getting people not to use their cars is so they can park close to transport corridors. So that is not the solution. The solution is for commuter car parks, like at Gordon. And however you achieve that, it would be welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Our next speaker is David Brown, who will be speaking against.
I'm not sure if I'm against or for.
Okay.
A bit of both.
That's all right.
So I'm David Brown. I'm from 24 Shirley Road. For those interested, I don't have a tractor or anything like that. I can see that fell in a heap, but anyway. Really, I want to express appreciation for some of the changes that have been made. We are located within the Todd, and they're definitely a positive step towards practical contemporary planning objectives. I think everybody has expressed concern about the unequal distribution of the majority of the housing, and I won't go on from there. I won't repeat those. I also recognise that for various reasons it's been difficult to have a clear, strategic and forward-looking plan. The current processes have been rushed for various reasons, and I understand from state government and local government. And I think that this sort of leads to the concerns to our property and also our neighbours. We were in a consortium which was broken up. It's been zoned for park and a road with greater than 20% gradient. The proposed park is bounded by elevated buildings, reducing sunlight access. Ours and the property behind us, which was Mark Franklin's, is sandwiched between 8 to 10 storey developments on the east-west axis, severely impacting sunlight. Transition heights nearby are higher than our current property, which is within the Todd and other places. I have just learned tonight that there is ample riparian space for large parks just outside the Todd. So in conclusion, we request an uplift in the context of our property. This is purely to maintain value and to really downsize, as we've heard tonight. So my wife and I urge the council to re-examine the proposal to ensure those issues that I've raised are covered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Our next speaker is Paul Grimble, who will be speaking against.
Councillors, attendees and neighbours. I wish to address Council on the terrible outcome the Council plan will have on landowners in Newark Crescent who back onto Beaconsfield Parade properties. Over the back fence, on higher land, we will have very large properties, we have very large properties fronting out onto Beaconsfield Parade. On the other side, we have the proposed new public space, presumably a park. Residents in Newark Crescent made a submission to Council saying that the 12-metre height limit and the 0.85 FSR terrace town zoning was uneconomic and not warranted when assessed against the 7 principles applied by Council to guide the preparation of the Council's plan. I won't name each principle, suffice to say that the Newark Crescent properties are not constrained or impacted by any of these considerations, warranting restriction of development to townhouses only. Our neighbours immediately over the back fence on Beaconsfield Parade, which is on higher land, have height limits of 18.5 metres and 29 metres. Arguably, the development of these properties should have been constrained by transition requirements to Newark Crescent and heritage considerations arising from the Beaconsfield Parade Heritage Conservation Area, which seems to have disappeared. In the case of the Beaconsfield Parade properties backing onto the Newark properties, there is no road separation, and the Council has seen fit to apparently ignore 2 or more of its 7 planning principles, being the heritage considerations and the transition impacts. Now, this impact is felt directly by 9 of the Newark properties, being numbers 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 and 20 that back onto Beaconsfield Parade. I repeat, there is no road separation or other buffer for any of these properties. Nowhere else in Linfield can I see so many properties impacted to the extent that the Newark Crescent properties have been impacted. These properties are now significantly reduced in value, and on the advice from property developers, uneconomic for development. Feedback from council said that the Newark Crescent's proximity to and shading of the proposed park may have caused council to steer away from the stated 7 principles. To this we reply that Newark Crescent lies to the south of the park and hence incapable of shading the park in any significant way. We note that properties on Bent Street and Balfour Street, opposite the park on the other side, have height limits of 18.5 metres and 29 metres. These are located to the north of the proposed park and will shade the park for many hours a day. The latest council report stated it will consider an amendment to the exhibited plans when the review identifies, amongst other things, inconsistent application of principles. The Newark Crescent submission, prepared by Urbis Planning, highlighted the inconsistent application of council's principles as they apply to Newark Crescent properties. But there is no evident consideration of this in the council assessment. The council's treatment of the Newark landowners is terribly unfair, but can be easily fixed. We ask that the councillors please review the Newark Crescent submission and accommodate an upzoning in terms of height and FSR, consistent with our neighbours over the back fence on Beaconsfield Parade, consistent with our neighbours on the other side of the proposed park on Bent Street and Balfour Street, and more importantly, consistent with council's own planning guidelines. Thank you.
Okay, Paul, I've just got a question from Councillor Sam Nye, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you, Paul, for coming. So just to summarise, you're saying that 29 metres overlooking 12 metres on a boundary fence is crazy, or not appropriate?
Well, that's what it is, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Our next speaker is Jemima Roberts, who will be speaking against.
Well, thank you for your time. It's very fitting I'm following Paul. My name's Jemima Roberts, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of my family in Linfield, whose home is subject to compulsory acquisition by the council for this park. So we have 2 young children in preschool and kindergarten in the local area, and like many families, had planned to remain in our home for decades to come, particularly while our children complete primary school and high school. It has therefore been deeply distressing to learn that we will now be legally forced to remove from our family home by council. I wish to briefly raise 2 key concerns: compensation and timing. First, compensation. Under council's proposal, our home is being acquired to make way for public open space that supports the mid to high density development zoned by council in our vicinity along Balfour Street, Beaconsfield Parade, Bent Street and the Pacific Highway. This acquisition was not something that we requested, and nor was it flagged in any of the 4 planning options publicly exhibited in late 2024. Now, there's been a public perception that homeowners in our position will be fairly compensated. Unfortunately, however, after meeting with council, it appears we are being afforded none of these protections. So to give effect to its park acquisition plan, council has chosen to both remove our home from the Todd area, but also downzone it in such a way that we now appear to be entitled to only minimal levels of compensation. As such, we will likely be priced out of the area, unable to compete for local properties with neighbours who have sold by choice to developers for a significant uplift. Yet, unlike others, we don't have the option to remain in our home if and when the compensation offered by council is inadequate. Second, to timing. While our initial concern was the possibility of being forced from our family home imminently, we've now come to realise that the greater anxiety actually stems from the opposite, the uncertainty of not knowing when or if we will be able to move. Because our home has been identified for future acquisition by council, we are now unable to sell. We have no control or autonomy over what happens next. It is entirely in council's hands. And despite the stress and disruption already caused and the high density development that will imminently surround our block, we cannot now move until council decides to act in acquiring our property. We don't know if council will force us to stay for 1, 3, 5, even 15 years. In the meantime, we are left in a state of uncertainty, surrounded by construction and unable to plan for our future. Now, this is not a tenable situation for any family, particularly those with young children. So I guess the main thing we are asking tonight is that if Council truly intends to allow us to have some control as to the timing of the acquisition process, we ask that tomorrow night that councillors commit by resolution that where homeowners in our situation request it, Council will first initiate the acquisition process in a timely manner, ideally within 12 months of the LEP amendment being published, and 2, regardless of the acquisition method, whether by mutual agreement, hardship or compulsory acquisition, they will ensure that all heads of compensation are made available to affected homeowners. This would allow us to relocate, make informed decisions and move forward with our lives, including finding a home near our children's primary school and preschool. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Jemima. If you don't mind maybe just coming back up. Sorry, you ran away so quickly, and I will just refer you to our General Manager to just clarify some of the issues that you had.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council did write to the landowners that we are proposing to acquire to assure you that Council would be unlikely to to force the acquisition, and it hadn't done so in the past. We also said that Council would be hoping to be able to negotiate acquisitions at the timing that of the landowner's choosing, and also pointed out that should that not work out, owners have the right to bring on the acquisition, owner-initiated acquisition, at the timing of your choosing.
We really appreciate that. As I said, the specific issue here that we're requesting clarification and confirmation commitments from Council, as we understand it, if we initiate, we lose certain entitlements like relocation costs and stamp duty and so forth. This is why we wrote to Council a month ago, simply asking for a commitment that we'll be entitled to all heads of compensation. We do acknowledge and appreciate that there's been these public statements from Council that we will have some control of the process. As we understand it, if we initiate, we lose some of those entitlements. That's simply what we're asking for, to actually have a true choice. As we see it, it wouldn't actually be a true choice if we lose all associated relocation entitlements. So I guess that's the main point. We're just asking for some public commitments. If we do initiate, as Council seems to be publicly holding out, that will just be have access to all heads of compensation. We won't have to forfeit that by waiting until Council initiates. So that's just what we're asking for tonight.
Thank you, Jemima. Our next speaker is Ron Green, which I believe is speaking online via Zoom. No, I believe Ron's not online. So we'll move on to our next speaker, which is Mark Brayan, who will be speaking against.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm actually a conditional 4. I didn't realise that was an option. So,
okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
For the clarity.
And
we will change that on the record.
I feel my concerns are trivial after Jemima, so I hope things work out for you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for the process, for the opportunity to speak, for your endurance. It's well past my bedtime. I live outside of the Todd zone. I live in a heritage-listed property in Pymble. We're affected by the LMR. We're not affected by the Todd yet. It came on all of us pretty quickly, so it could expand. But I actually thought I'd come along and speak on behalf or speak in support of all heritage owners in the community. I'm a conditional 4 because I appreciate the need for development, and I'm generally supportive of it, but I wish there could be some changes made to give sympathetic transitions to heritage properties that are sort of stranded within the zone. This point's been made many times, so I'm just adding my voice to it. An issue that's come up is the potential to reassess properties and potentially delist them. If that's the case, then I think that should be done on a case-by-case basis. Certainly, from our perspective, we love our house. It's a beautiful building. It would hurt my heart if it was demolished, if I drove past it at some point in the future and it wasn't there. I think it's significant. It was built by a former mayor of Ku-ring-gai, so I think it's a house that needs to be preserved. But of course it comes with an obligation as an owner. It does impact a lot of things that you do with your home. I went through the development process as well and complied with all the requests. So it's an obligation and it's one that many owners step up for, but it shouldn't be a burden. We shouldn't end up being surrounded by massive houses that limit its value, etc. So thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
All right, thank you, Mark. Our next speaker is Barry Farr, who will be speaking against.
Thank you, councillors, for the opportunity tonight. I am for and
Okay, we'll
for
change
the
that on
proposed.
the record.
But I'd like it to go a little bit further.
Okay.
In respect. So I'm very far. I need to change glasses. My wife and I have lived on 33 Shirley Road on the corner of Alston Way for 28 years. Our property is affected by the proposed zoning. I wish to make comment on the proposals from a practical point of view. Apart from the state government's TOD altering forever the North Shore's greenbelt character, our principal concern with the council's preferred TOD is the redistribution of the zoning changes from the eastern side of the railway to the western side, and specifically the effect on Shirley Road. Shirley Road has become a very busy thoroughfare beyond the rat run of Lady Game Drive, or from Lady Game Drive, since the development of the Linfield Learning Village and the associated housing estate. In peak hour, it is difficult to exit the top of Shirley Road, requiring as many as 4 or 5 traffic light changes. Further, weekday commuter parking now extends down Shirley Road beyond the Rifleway. One development application under the SSD has already been lodged for a high-rise at 17 to 21 Shirley Road, comprising 6 stories and a rooftop terrace. This building, which will sit aside the Roseville Kindergarten, will house 122 bedrooms and has 110 car parks for residents. Assuming just 50% of the bedrooms are occupied by 2 people, and most of those people have a vehicle, then the demand for street parking for another 50 to 70 vehicles will be acute and, I dare say, impossible. The increase in residents' vehicles will make it so much harder to exit Shirley Road, and that is just one of the potential high-rise to be built at the top end of Shirley Road. There is a suggestion, as mentioned earlier, a road could be built at great expense, no doubt, near the Rifleway across to Pokeley Avenue. But already, as was mentioned earlier again, the existing McLaurin Street in peak hour is just as difficult as Shirley Road, and the high-rise developments in that area are also underway to make it more difficult. Council's amendment affecting the 9 properties in Shirley Road and Bomber Roads east of Alston Way, which includes our property, is a welcome change, reducing the height of development from 18.5 metres to 12 metres. However, the properties in both Shirley and Bomber Roads opposite these 9 properties remain R2 residential, which is inconsistent and disadvantages the owners of those properties in that they'll be looking at across the road at higher rise. The solution would be to allow those 9 properties to be subject to amendment and remain R2 residential. This would go some way to alleviating the road congestion. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Barry. Our next speaker is Matthew Gervin, who is speaking online via Zoom. Okay, whenever you're ready, Matthew.
Thank you. My submission is as a local resident and a town planner by profession. It relates to 924 Pacific Highway Gordon, the site on the corner of Ryde Road and Civic Highway, and fronting Rich Street and Fitzsimmons Lane, which are much lower than the highway. I object to the 54.5 metre height and 6:1 FSR for this site and request that it be reduced to 29 metres and 3:1 to match the surrounding sites. There is a buffer within the proposed dwelling numbers that would allow for this reduction in height and FSR. This reduction would not jeopardise the state government dwelling targets. The reasons for my submission: firstly, all 50 metre plus buildings, being the large towers, should be located within the Gordon Town Centre adjacent to the train station. This site is 850 metres away walking distance from the train station. The preferred scenario was exhibited as being an extension from 400 metres to 800 metres, not 850 metres. It results in one isolated 16-storey building site at 924 Pacific Highway that is double the height of all surrounding buildings, which is a poor planning and urban design outcome. Secondly, 924 Pacific Highway is directly to the north of 3 residential flat buildings. An increase in height control to 54.5 metres will cast significant overshadowing on these neighbouring residential buildings to the south. The apartment design guide requires a minimum of 70% of units receiving 2 hours direct solar access at midwinter. These neighbouring buildings are already less than or at the 70% mark, and any overshadowing would reduce these to non-compliant levels. It will be impossible to maintain solar compliance with a 54.5 metre height control. The overshadowing impacts are exacerbated by a very significant level change from the Pacific Highway down to Ridge Street and Fitzsimmons Lane of approximately 4 storeys in height. Finally, Attachment 8 recommends that the properties on the southern side of Carlotta Avenue, also in Gordon, have their proposed height control reduced from 29 metres to 17.5 metres. Reducing height to these properties does not make as much sense, as they are to the north of the railway line and will not result in overshadowing to other residential properties. The levels of these Carlotta Avenue properties are significantly lower than the level of the adjacent railway line and highway. It would be much better outcome to reduce the height at 924 Pacific Highway, which will have significant overshadowing impacts. Thank you. And finally, I just note that I have provided a written submission with some images attached to that.
Thank you, Matthew. Our next speakers are Adrian Ciano or Carolyn Weir, representing Uniting New South Wales /ACT, speaking for. Caroline.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, councillors. I'm Caroline and I'm one of the development managers at Uniting, so responsible for this project. Uniting is a not-for-profit community services provider who has been providing services to the community of Ku-ring-gai for well over 50 years and provides hundreds of services every day. The proposal affects our site at 1A and 1 to 7 Carlotta Avenue, Gordon. Recognising the urgent need for additional seniors housing within the Ku-ring-gai LGA, the proposal has sensibly nominated the site for increased height and FSR. There is significant concern in relation to Attachment 8 that explores potential options to offset the additional yield generated from SSDAs that have been lodged or are currently on exhibition in the Ku-ring-gai LGA. The site is identified as one of those which may be appropriate to remove uplift from. These SSDA applications are under current assessment and it is not certain that they will be approved in their current form or at all. Any proposal to remove the site from uplift is not supported and would be detrimental to the future housing needs of the community. Responding to community needs, Uniting purchased the old council depot with a view to provide much needed modern senior services. Since 2022, the need in the community for seniors housing has continued to grow. Council's local strategic planning statement identifies that by 2036, people aged 65 and above will increase by 49%. Whilst housing across all age groups is needed, the need for diverse, supportive, purpose-built accommodation for the fastest growing segment of the population should not be ignored. Seniors have specific needs, and when they move, they vacate their family homes, freeing up much needed housing stock for younger families or, if zoned correctly, for many other dwellings. At over 16,000 square metres, our site is significant in size. It's owned by one owner and does not require amalgamation for a development to occur quickly. The site's sloping topography is bounded by the railway line, Mona Vale Road and Carlota Avenue, and with only one apartment building and 3 houses, one of which we own, by uniting is neighbouring, will have little built form impact on the surrounding community. Plans for the site have commenced with 2 rounds of community consultation, including meetings with the councils and council staff. Given council's proposal, our architects have completed a massing study for the site. The additional yield could be housed on the site without adverse impact. We request that the site remains included for increased height and FSR, supporting the provision of much needed seniors housing and not excluded as per any alternative proposal. Uniting commends a sensible and well-considered reimagining of the Todd set as exhibited, and as Australia's largest seniors housing provider, Uniting can provide modern, diverse housing and care services, supporting senior residents of Ku-ring-gai to age with dignity in a place that creates community, connection and well-being. Uniting Gordon is on Uniting's 10-year plan. Work on documents for a development application is well underway, and we could quickly change to incorporate the proposed additional yield. Thank you.
Right, just a question from Councillor Alec Taylor. Karen.
Hi, Alec.
Hi, how are you going? Thank you very much for coming tonight. Thank you very much for the work that you do for this incredibly valuable organisation. Thank you for the fantastic briefing the other night on your development. Can we please get back to you on this one?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sam Nye has a question for you.
Yeah, similar to Alec, thank you for presenting to us, not just this term, but last council term as well. On both occasions I asked, would you be open to more height to provide for needs? And there was always a cryptic answer, right? And from what I understood, the current planned SSD was FSR 1.3 to 1 or something like that, but you can confirm you're open to more? If
Yeah, as the current changes, we would be definitely open to
cool,
more.
thank you.
You're popular today, Carolyn. Councillor Indu Balachandran.
Thank you for coming, and I echo the other councillors' comments on your briefing and the plans and the work you do. The question I have was, is your current plan based on the FSR prior to the preferred scenario, as in prior to the TOD, or the preferred scenario?
So our current plan that we presented last week, is based on 1.3 to 1 with the SEP bonus in place. The building massing that we've done with our architects previously considers the proposed plan that we're in support of.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Our next speaker is Edward Gregory, who will be speaking against. Okay, it doesn't look like Gregory's here, so we'll move on to the next speaker, which is Natalie Boyd, who will be speaking against.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, councillors and neighbours. For context, I live in Park Avenue in a heritage listed house in what is now the high density town centre of Gordon. You'll not be surprised that I oppose your scenario. The past 18 months have been challenging for the relationship between the heritage community and council, but I'm looking for glimmers of hope, and it seems that we're seeing steps in the right direction. At the last community forum, council acknowledged that because of their high value heritage, the precincts east of Killara and Roseville stations must be protected by maintaining their context. That recognition marks a clear departure from the idea that all heritage is equal. We now accept openly that some heritage has a higher value or is more equal than others. It also confirms that loss of context directly reduces heritage value. Council and the Planning Minister have rightly confirmed that Council holds the delegation to delist properties. That's another welcome and necessary step in the right direction. With that clarity, I urge Council to ensure the proposed heritage review includes the 8 local heritage homes in Gordon, which lose their context amidst high-density town centre development. I also urge that the review be timely, direct and involve homeowners to assess whether their homes warrant listing today and how best their history is recognised, whether it's through preservation, curtilage, adaptive reuse or commemoration. Some heritage is better remembered with a plaque, a park name or a streetscape feature, not necessarily the entire original sterilised house. This will help Council move beyond the outdated idea that exclusion equals protection. That's a model that has and is failing our community. This is the moment to shift course so we retain more than just a nod to Ku-ring-gai's character. Of all councils, Ku-ring-gai knows that heritage homes have individual stories, so they must be considered individually to understand how they best contribute or not to the community going forward. To strengthen the proposed review, I propose amending Recommendation C to include all heritage homes retained in the town centres, and that Council must deliver findings by the July 25 Council meeting, so any delisting proposals are included in the updated LEP. Something like the study Council's already done for the Gordon Centre. Councillors, my proposed wording for that is with you. With regard to the preferred scenario, this is a once-in-a-generation planning opportunity, but what's on the table still includes mid-block zoning transitions, avoids logical planning, applies village principles to town centres and strands cottages beside towers. It's not there yet, despite all efforts to suggest it is. All LMR zones are still painted green and give the illusion of no change. Artist impressions paint trees over heritage properties to present them as park-like green space. And despite assertions otherwise, I understand SSDs will continue to be submitted regardless of whether Council's long-awaited scenario is in place or not. Of great concern, the Taverner Research Report seems to have been altered. On page 11, a new column titled Total Meets has been added after the report has been written and contrary to the original analysis. This addition implies community consensus where none exists, and that undermines trust. Trust matters because without it, consultation becomes theatre, and I'm a consultation professional. Residents were given 200 plus pages of dense documentation with no summaries, briefings or clear communication. That's exclusion by overload. Your leadership is needed. We need time, support and collaboration to get this right. I call on Council to hold a heritage forum or workshop, a place where together we can have the hard conversations that this community needs to have about heritage. We must stop avoiding conversations about heritage. I also would take this opportunity to ask Council to review the Gordon solution, the Park Avenue proposal and the application of planning principles to the Gordon HCA that have all been provided and our community have not had any feedback on. Ku-ring-gai is in a unique position. You can be the council that says, here's how and where we protect what matters and we build what's needed. This is your moment. Please be bold, be fair and lead. Because if some things are to stay the same, then others must change. Thank you.
Oh, Natalie, sorry. Councillor Barry-Chandron's got a question for you. No, that's okay.
Thank you, Natalie. Past everyone's bedtime, but we appreciate people staying up and sharing their concerns. I actually just wanted you to repeat or clarify, or perhaps you can send us an email about that Taverner's report section that has been...
Absolutely. I've actually provided written comments and referred to page 11 and where that piece has been added after the published design has been done. It's put in, and you can do it by text into a PDF, and that's what's happened.
Lovely, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you. No.
Always happy to chat. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Our next speakers are Sally and Craig Kugel. So it looks like Sally's speaking, and she'll be speaking against.
Mayor Kay, councillors, council staff and residents. My name is Sally Kugel. I'm the owner of 6 Treats Road, Linfield. Our much-loved family home of 20 years is a listed heritage item that sits within the Stanhope Road Heritage Conservation Area. We support the preservation of our heritage item and retention of Treats Road in the Stanhope HCA as is contemplated in the preferred scenario. I believe, however, that there should be more appropriate transitioning surrounding our property and the HCA, noting that our immediate neighbouring properties are themselves also either a heritage listed item, being number 8, or a contributory item, being number 4. Number 4A, Treats Road, is a recently developed battle axe behind number 4. It has been upzoned out of the HCA to R4 12 metres. This is inappropriate as it sits at a much higher level than numbers 4 and 6, and will realistically appear as 5 stories above our respective residences. I request that it retain its R2 zoning as under the KLEP. As Kalara Avenue, the properties at our rear in Kalara Avenue have also been inappropriately upzoned. They also sit significantly higher than us due to the fall in topography from Kalara Avenue to Treats Road. They would thus appear much taller from our property's perspective and would not provide the much needed transition to a heritage item or HCA. These properties should also retain their R2 zoning. On the south side of Treats Road, an upzoning of R4 18.5 metres is proposed for the southern side of Treats Road and the Wolseley Road intersection with Treats Road. This would allow for development of 5 stories directly opposite an R2 zoned HCA. This does not give an appropriate transition either, so I request this to be given a 12 metre or 3-storey zoning to allow for appropriate transition. In making these submissions, I note that on page 28 of the Extraordinary General Meeting papers, there is an acknowledgement that there is built-in headroom that provides a strategic buffer that allows council to refine zoning or respond to site-specific heritage considerations without jeopardising overall supply. I believe this is an appropriate situation to use this headroom. Finally, I would just like to say that I am deeply saddened by the wholesale devastation of Linfield that is contemplated in the preferred scenarios. In particular, our local environs by the proposed large-scale upzoning of the Wolseley Road HCA and the triangle embracing the Masada Temple, Ellahan Road and the Rita Murnley Learning School. This will give rise to enormous planning and implementation issues given the landlocked nature of this triangle and, among other things, the existence of critically endangered remnant blue gum high forest on the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Our next speaker is Yun Fen Zaya, who is representing 40, 42, 46, 48 Merrill Street in Gordon and speaking against.
Dear councillors, council staff and committee members, my name is Yun Fen. I represent a group of residents from South Merrill Street, Gordon. Basically, we have 2 concerns. The first concern is about the item G14 in the proposed amendment. For that amendment, roughly 30 lots, 30 properties, their height of building are reduced to 18.5 meters and floor space ratio down to 1.3. We are aware the reason in the report is saying it says inconsistent approach to the building height, transition 8-story building height along the Vale Street. While we believe that is valid for the most properties in that change, but it doesn't really apply for the 36 to 48 Merrill Street, 7 lots. Basically, the sites sit on the low side of both Merrill Street and Vale Street, being surrounded by high floor space ratios, commercial buildings, and on commercial land and mixed-use land. To the north, I provided photos in the report in summation. The sites face 4 large, 7 stories buildings located on mixed-use or commercial land zones. These buildings have bulky forms, minimum deep soil areas, and some include ground level retail. The floor space ratio would be increased again, this time with 3 and with a height of 29 meters, and creating a big difference between that with the sites, which is 1.7, and the ratio is higher than 2 because the ratio is 2.3, higher than the standard typical planning standard too. And if we look at the east, that's a really short street, but if you look at the east, the sites adjoin 3 large residential flat buildings and 2 commercial buildings. These properties were built, are now proposed to reach heights between 29 meters and 51.5 meters high, just along a 200 meters short street. And if we look at the west, which is the report mentions along the Vale Street, but actually those 7 lots just face the intersections around about of the Vale Street and the Merrill Street, providing sufficient space and distance from nearby buildings, including those on the Ridge Street. And more importantly, houses on the Vale Street are situated on the higher side again, and they appear roughly 1 story or 1.5 stories higher. Yeah, and to the north, the sites face only pretty much on the level, same level or even a bit lower, and then their south neighbor. And so the sites I'm talking about they are supposed to be a transitional area, but unfortunately they are not due to whatever reasons in the past, because highways in the north and everywhere in the 3 directions. And the result, currently residents experience overshadowing, reduced solar access, and a loss of privacy from surrounding developments for a decade already. So that's a second concern, is that we express our concern about many SSDs, particularly near the train stations. For example, we know we have roughly 19, 8, and the state government probably they want to save all of those, and they're concentrating in Linfield, Roseville, and some in Gordon, particularly on the east side. Linfield, both sides a lot, but we still in our plan we still propose high density development around the train stations with floor space ratio 2, 3, and even 8, and this would worsen this issue. And we know traffic, in our report, we lack of traffic report. Our traffic report is outdated, actually. But our planning is forward, is next 15 years. That's a big drawback. So we therefore recommend reducing the height of buildings on certain sites. So for example, in Gordon, because I live in Gordon, like G4, G5, they're pretty much the car park. Now, we can just reduce the height of those buildings and around the train station to reduce this impact. So finally, in light of the above, we request the council to revert the height of buildings of 36 to 48 back to 22.5 meters high, which is approximately 7 meters lower than the original 29 meters height, and to restore its floor space ratio to 1.8. I think all of those adjustments would better reflect the site's transitional role, and also, again, another recommendation is we may need to rebalance the housing density among 4 suburbs.
Can you just wrap it up now?
Yeah. Very last sentence.
That's okay.
Yeah. Rebalance the housing density among 4 suburbs because SSDs and a lot of SSDs are we need better balance away from the train station. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you, Yunfeng. Our next speaker is Jonathan Karanakis, representing the Erraldine Trust and the Erraldine Foundation Limited, speaking for.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you, Madam Mayor, residents of Ku-ring-gai and council staff. I'm speaking on behalf of the Geraldine Trust. I'm one of the directors on the board. The Geraldine Trust is the charitable custodian of a property which I hope, I expect it would need no introduction to many of you, possibly to most of you, located at 17 Macintosh Street, Gordon. It's a state heritage listed property of exceptional historical, architectural and botanical significance. I'm speaking on behalf of the board for, but with some reservations, as will become clear. I will still give the property some introduction. It's internationally as well as nationally renowned. It actually literally brings in international tourists. I think that sets it apart from other heritage items in the area. Constructed in 1914, it has it's architecturally designed by William Hardy Wilson for the Professor E.G. Waterhouse, who left the property to the public in his will. In his words, it was for the enjoyment of the nation. It's surrounded by a rather unique, meticulously curated garden, entirely cared for by volunteers. It's home to what is in fact one of the most significant collections of camellias in Australia, possibly, well, it ranks up there in terms of world collections of camellias. And of course I mentioned the botanical significance. It's of scientific interest to botanical institutions around the globe. The setting, the garden, the view, everything about the place is as important to 17 Macintosh Street as the house itself. At the same time, we fully acknowledge the state government's goal, increasing housing supply through this TOD policy. We stress that higher density should not come at the cost of particularly important heritage such as Geraldine. So our concerns, we're concerned by the height of development proposed directly to the north of Geraldine. Excessive height does threaten critical view lines to and from the property, which overshadow the property, which will have an impact on two things: the public's ability to enjoy the property. That's the purpose of the property. It has no comparison, I think, in the Ku-ring-gai area as a council asset, and it has that overshadowing will have an impact on the plants itself in the property. Our suggestions are strict height controls, limitations on underground parking, respectful setbacks, and design controls, all part of a master planning process, particularly to preserve this property for the enjoyment of the public. So we ask that the council recognise this in its planning, lead with vision, and ensure that progress and preservation go hand in hand.
Okay. Oh, you've got a question from Councillor Sam Nye.
Thanks, Jonathan, for coming. How do you feel about 21 to 25 Macintosh Street? What's your view on the impacts on Geraldine, etc.?
I won't speak in great detail. Like I said, we are not opposed to development and we're not opposed to increasing housing supply. We just ask that any development adjacent to the property has consideration of Geraldine itself and its impact on the public enjoyment. I personally think that more density, I'll phrase that differently, and this is just a personal view, more people around a public asset means more people enjoy the asset. So that's itself not a bad thing, but we have to make sure that Geraldine itself is cared for appropriately.
So to clarify, you don't mind this massive 9 stories next door? Or?
I'm not going to answer that categorically.
Right, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Our next speaker is Karen Bio, maybe? And Karen will be speaking for.
Firstly, thank you. I'd like to thank Madam Mayor, councillors and residents here. Gosh, I can see why the developers are coming in here. What a beautiful area we all live in, listening to everyone speaking. I own a property in Middle Harbour Road, Linfield, and in support to more detailed written submission that I put in, I'd like to probably highlight and summarise some of those points because I don't think I can fit it all in 3 minutes. I support the Council's proposed Todd alternative, and I encourage Council's decision to continue fighting against the proposal currently being rushed through as SSDs that are in direct conflict with Council's Todd principles and approach. Specifically, the proposed SSD development of concern, which affects me mostly, is at 59 to 63 Trafalgar Avenue and 1A and 1B Valley Road, Linfield. This is currently the largest development in size and mass of any single development proposed outside of the Council's preferred Todd zone. I did submit a map when I put in my proposal just to show you where it was sitting. This SSD consists of 220 units that will be 9 to 10 stories high. As this is already an elevated position, the top of the hill in Trafalgar Avenue it will be sitting on the northern aspect of at least 8 properties in Middle Harbour Road. This casts a massive shade problem over all of us, which is seen in the diagrams, but I haven't included that here. It also is encroaching around the heritage conservation homes, and interestingly enough, there are 4 heritage homes and items that are bordering the boundaries of this property, being the SSD development, that is. I find it hard to believe that this can even be considered, but we're in it. This is an example of possibly poor Todd planning, and as a result, this lacks in poor urban planning outcomes. The Council, I'm sure, has the power to object to development, and I ask that it allocates the appropriate resources to oppose this and other proposed developments of this scale that are materially inconsistent with the Council's proposed development approach. This particular SSD in Trafalgar Avenue and Valley Road, Linfield, needs to be prioritised as it will set up a precedent that Council will lose control over if it is ignored. I'm going to jump to my final point because I can hear I'm running out of time. Basically, in my view, if the boundaries don't change, in my view, if the boundaries don't change, the affordable housing bonus provisions should be turned off, and all Todd sites that are in excess of 400 metres walking distance from the train station entry, where they are located in and around heritage conservation areas, would be worth considering. This is obviously going to affect a lot of properties that we can hear tonight that are heritage homes, and I think maybe could be considered. I have a lot more to say, but that's all I can fit in.
Thank you. Aaron, we just have one question from Councillor Alec Taylor.
Thank you. I will try to keep this as brief as absolutely possible given how late it's getting. Thank you so much for coming. The SSDs is the other terrible outcome of this whole process, and I strongly applaud your opposition and encourage your opposition to that. I can confirm before I get to my question that we will be making submissions on all SSDs on the basis of merits, as we must do by law. I encourage you to do the same, and particularly on the basis of the heritage items around, which I believe could be a good angle. And my question for you is, do you have a group of people who are providing individual submissions to the Planning Department on this front?
Thank you. I have actually spoken to a number. I'm probably representing a few of my neighbours because we have spoken about this. We've only really had a good... It's such a large document. By the time you probably understand it all and be able to submit it, we're slowly getting a group of people together. I do understand we have to have 50 or more that will be recognised either as a petition or objections to the mass of this building. We're in the process of trying to put that together of some form, and the answer to that is probably because of its location. Valley Road is actually a little bit of an S street up a hill, and it's not in an ideal situation. It also doesn't have a formal boundary road at the rear. We're all houses zoned in R2, which are all our north to rear aspects with swimming pools. May be nice to live in, of course, but we're going to have a massive building which is already overheight looking into all our backyards, and now we're all shadowed.
Yep, thank you
So,
very much. And
thank you.
let me please just encourage you all to make individual submissions, as they will be counted individually.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, one more question.
Oh, one, yeah, sorry.
Thank-
He had it on and then he turned it off and now
And
it's
then I
back
turned
on
it off.
again.
Yeah, thanks for organising. Was from what I could tell before, Middle Harbour and Valley, there were all these separate inquiries instead of a joint effort. My question is, can you comment on the awesome exhibition process run by Landmark with regard to the SSD? What was the experience like?
Going through everything, exhaust.
Yeah, like how did they consult you?
Yep. All right. What I've really only been able to take the submission offline, of course, right? And it's a massive, I suppose, project that they've put together in various forms, right down to Aboriginal reviews, etc., on their whole proposal. I am speaking to an architect who is by the name of Jim Koopman, who is certainly helping or guiding us in what appears to not be requiring all the building requirements, and I would probably need to take that further when I put in my submission together with everyone else on this particular project in detail.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. We have, looks like our last speaker for the evening, last but not least, Kerry Ann Ramsey, who is speaking online via Zoom. And Kerry Ann will be speaking against.
Good evening. In terms of my approach to the original Todd, I was a bit philosophical about it. My perspective is we have a moral obligation to provide housing for our community. Young women from my generation had no opportunity to get housing because there simply wasn't any low entry places to go to. And myself and one other friend, the only way that we got access was by buying with family. That is not an option that's available to everyone. I also recognise the importance of the train line and its place in getting people to and from the city and other workplaces. However, as I've written and spoken to councillors at multiple points, I have big concerns around two particular heritage locations. The first being 36 Henry Street, Westwood Hoe, a heritage item that is stranded. That was done prior to councillors here. That goes back to 2015 and earlier. That site is now on your maps surrounded by 29-metre buildings, which is going to completely ensconce that building if there is any development that can happen with it. Further to that, I've made it very clear all the concerns around the land tax associated with that because it is a rental property and the effects that that has on the renters who are coming to, who we try and keep the rent low for them. Unfortunately, when we take this to the valuer general with very reasonable claims around the effects on the human dimension of our community, they continue to insist that they keep those prices the way that they are. That means we have to keep going back to those renters, increasing their rates, and these are people who work in industries like health and aged care. The second property that I'm associated with is 6 Park Avenue. There's been a lot of talk from residents in this street. We are deeply affected by the decisions that are happening. To the south, we've got the SSP property that is now going to be 9 to 10 stories if that goes through as a solid wall across my front yard. To the north, overshadowing me, will be a 7-storey building if that goes through that steps up along the slope up to the heritage boundary. I'm an HCA property, but again, bound by all these requirements under the new proposals as opposed to the TOD. And then council also to the Pearson Avenue side of my property has placed 20 metres of property there. So what, 7 metres at the minimum, 7 stories at the minimum. I am asking that I like the proposal that council make an evaluation of various properties. I urge, particularly for individual stranded sites, that would be a place to start, like 36 Henry Street, like other properties that have been mentioned tonight. Secondly, I would like to say it's clear there's community outcry around what's happening on Park Avenue. There is a major gridlock in that area already. My dad nearly gets hit by a car about once a week on pedestrian crossings. The data in that document is unrealistic. It does not recognise true accidents. I've had a man hit on a bicycle by a car driving around the pedestrian crossing right in front of me, and those things are clearly not recorded when you're saying there's only been 5 near misses or accidents in the area. There needs to be better data around that if we're protecting our community and developing walkable access to the station. Add to that this idea of having, massive development, then suddenly these 2-storey areas next to it. Please, one, consider that the proposal to evaluate all heritage items, and two, I'd really ask that if you are going to have this lengthy process, I've asked that R2 is assigned to 36 Henry Street, Gordon, because of the financial impacts that zoning is having at the moment. Should it be delisted, we will be the first to jump on board with the R4 or M1, whatever that new zoning is. We will be on board for that because we want to provide housing. Thank you. Sorry I went long.
No, that's okay. You were the last one, so I thought I'd give you a bit of extra time. Okay. That looks like that's it. So I'd like to thank everyone for participating in tonight's public forum. You've all been fantastic. You've all been listening to all the speakers in silence, so I do appreciate that. It's been a fabulous night. And I know it's been a long night, so thank you. The webcast of this forum will be published to Council's website tomorrow. The extraordinary council meeting will be held tomorrow, which is Thursday, the 22nd of May at 7:30 p.m. And you are encouraged to attend in person or view the live web stream via the council website. I encourage you to continue to stay engaged with council and share your feedback. Good night, everyone. Thank you.